Prologue. The sound of screaming woke the little girl up. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes, confused. It was still dark, it wasn't morning yet. The sound of her father's voice wafted up the stairs, urgent, breathless. He was saying something, but Scarlett couldn't hear what it was. She swung her skinny legs over the side of the bed and slipped off, silently padding across the room and out into the hallway. Carefully, she crept towards the glow of the downstairs light that bathed the stairs and sat down on the top step, hugging her knees to her chest as she peered through the banisters. Her father paced the hallway below, agitated, his gait unusually awkward. As he swung around to address someone, Scarlett stifled a gasp. He was holding his hand over a large dark patch of blood. As she watched, it seeped out and flooded down his shirt, and he groaned in pain. "Is Daddy dying?" she wondered in horror. Her mother came into view. Her pale skin was tinged with grey, and terror coloured her eyes. She wailed, but quickly put her hands to her mouth as her husband shushed her. "You're wake, Scarlet, woman," he berated. "You need to lie down. Christ, Ronan, you need a hospital," she whimpered. No hospitals, love." He touched her hair in comfort. "Lil will be here any minute. She'll fix this." He swung towards the front door, irritation flashing across his face. "Jesus, where is she?" he wavered, light-headed from the blood loss. "I'm here," came a quiet, strong voice from the kitchen. "Lil," Ronan breathed in relief. Lily Drew came into view, followed by her twin sons, and Scarlett pulled back into the shadows, unable to peel her eyes away from the scene below. Her Aunt Lily slowly walked in a circle, pausing to stare into the lounge for a moment. "Kath, put him on the kitchen table. Get a bottle of vodka, some clean towels, and your sewing kit," she instructed. Scarlett heard her mother gasp and begin to protest, but Aunt Lily cut her off with a dangerous flash of her eyes. "There's no time for dithering. Do it," she said, her tone stern. "Lil." Ronan paused as Kath began to lead him away. "What are we gonna do with him?" "Who?" Scarlett's childish curiosity got the better of her, and she crept down another couple of stairs, keeping close to the wall so she could see into the lounge. Her eyes widened as she clocked the man trussed up in a heap by the fireplace. There was a gag in his mouth, but as she watched, he wriggled and writhed, trying to free himself from his bindings. His eyes met hers, and a shiver of cold fear ran through her body. "He's seen too much," Lily replied. "There would be too much comeback from this." Ronan nodded. One of the twins reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a gun. Twisting a silencer onto the end, he handed it to his mother without a word. She stood before the man in the fireplace, staring down at him in contempt. "Did you really think you could take out Ronan Drew? Did you really think, even if you had, that you would be allowed to walk away from it?" she growled. Something in her tone sent icy chills up Scarlett's spine. She knew she shouldn't be here. Whatever was happening, this wasn't for her eyes. But she couldn't seem to move. "You stupid fool," Lily continued, her lip curling in contempt. "I don't suffer fools, and I certainly don't let 'em walk away once they've tried to mess with my family." She stepped closer and raised her arm, pointing the gun at his head. The man bucked and tried to back away, terror replacing the anger that had been in his eyes before. He looked to Scarlett, pleading silently for the little girl to help him, but all she could do was stare, frozen in terrified confusion. A second later, Lily pulled the trigger, the dulled sound of the shot echoing off the walls and making Scarlett jump in shock. The man slumped back, and blood sprayed across the rose-coloured carpet that was Kath's pride and joy. Scarlett opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Lily handed the gun back to her son and stared down at the dead man on the floor. "Wrap him and get him out of here," she said, eyeing the carpet with a slightly regretful look. "I needed to redecorate in here anyway," she muttered. As she moved to find out how her brother was doing, she caught sight of her niece cowering on the stairs. After a pause, she went and sat down next to her, wrapping her arm around her thin, shaking shoulders. "Close the door, Connor," she called to her nearest son. Moving into Scarlett's line of sight, Lily smiled kindly. "Come now, my little doll. Don't you worry," she crooned comfortingly. She sighed and pulled her closer. "That was a very bad man who tried to hurt your daddy. That's why I had to do that, to keep everyone safe. But Daddy's going to be just fine." She reached up with her free hand and smoothed Scarlett's hair. "And as for all that mess in there, Aunt Lily will take care of it. Aunt Lily takes care of all of you, remember? I'll never let anyone hurt you, any of you. You're safe, I promise." The little girl frowned at this and bit her lip. "What is it, little doll?" Lily asked. She sniffed and stared at the now closed door to the lounge and then back up at her aunt. "Who looks after you, Aunt Lily? What if someone comes to hurt you?" Lily pulled a wry smile and kissed her forehead. "I don't need anybody to look after me," she replied. "I'm very strong, my love. No one can hurt me." Scarlett stared back at the door again, her wide blue eyes serious. "Well then, I want to be like you when I grow up, Aunt Lily. I want to be strong so no one can hurt me either. Not ever." Chapter 1. 10 years later. Scarlett stared up from where she lay on her bed, through the Velux window above and into the sky. Her friend Natalie lay next to her, gushing about her boyfriend Scott, as if their month-long relationship was the greatest love story of all time. She tuned her out, bored of hearing how wonderful Scott was, and about all the plans they'd made for their future. Today was the day they were graduating from sixth form. It was a day of celebration for everyone in their year. Some of her peers were heading off to university. Some of them had jobs lined up, or were setting off on travel adventures. Scarlett had an offer from her first choice of university, St Andrews, to study business. It was something her mother was thrilled about, but although on the outside her father was too, she knew it would be a huge disappointment to him if she didn't join the family business. He and her Aunt Lily had been waiting on the sidelines to see what she would do, their fevered hope almost tangible. She had always been ahead of the rest of the class and passed her A-levels with flying colours. Her university acceptance had come quickly, and she'd immediately responded to accept her place. But she'd held off admitting this to her family, keeping this secret close to her chest. Not even Natalie knew yet. She'd avoided all talk of the future with everyone, claiming she needed time to think. For now, she just wanted to enjoy graduating from high school. She still had all summer to work up the courage to tell her dad. The decision to take this path hadn't been an easy one. She'd spent her whole life on the edges of the world her father and his side of the family inhabited. It had been hammered into her from an early age that the most important thing in life was the family. Nothing mattered more than that. The family firm had been built by her father and aunt from nothing up to the thriving enterprise it was today. They had built it with blood, sweat, and tears to be carried on by the next generation. It had all been for them, for their future, and Scarlett knew it. So it was difficult to turn away from it. The only person she knew would support her decision wholeheartedly was her mother, Kath, because the family business was not all it appeared to be on the surface. Her father ran a factory with Aunt Lily, which created small plastic parts for pipework. But although this was successful enough, the business ran much deeper and darker than that. The factory was also a front, a legal channel to funnel the real money they made from their less legal enterprises. And of those, there were many. The money was good, but the risks were high, and Kath wanted nothing more than to steer her daughter as far away from it as she could. Kath herself had nothing to do with the family business. She supported her husband, turned the other way, lied for him when required, and kept her mouth shut because she loved him fiercely. So when the time came when Scarlett could put off revealing her decision no longer, she knew that at least she'd have her mother on side. It was a small comfort against her torn loyalty and the pain and disappointment she was going to cause, but a comfort all the same. She glanced down at the clock on her wall and sat up. "Hey," she cut Natalie off mid-gush. "We're going to be late if we don't leave soon. Come on, grab your cap." She stood, picked her own graduation cap up off the desk, and carefully positioned it on top of her long raven hair. In the mirror, grey-blue eyes stared back at her from a pale, heart-shaped face. She pinched her cheeks in an attempt to give them some colour, but it didn't do much. With a look of resignation, she quickly applied some Vaseline to her full lips and ran her fingers through the ends of her hair before turning towards the door. "Come on, let's go." The young women made their way downstairs, Natalie following behind Scarlett. "Ladies!" As they entered the large kitchen, which was the heart of the house, Ronan greeted them with 2 glasses of champagne. "I think today's activities call for a little celebration, wouldn't you say?" At 6'3" with a broad frame and a face that told of many boxing matches lost, Ronan was a formidable-looking man. As dangerous as he appeared, indeed was, to his enemies, though, he had a huge heart with which he loved his family dearly. For his wife and daughter, he would do just about anything. Scarlett and Natalie took their glasses and raised them to meet his. Kath hurried forward to join them from the counter where she'd been checking the roast she had in for later, and Ronan wrapped his arm around her shoulders as they all chinked their glasses together. "Cheers to the both of you for all your achievements in high school, and for the future." He raised his glass higher. "I wish my family have always bestowed on those we love. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back, and may the sun shine warm upon your face." Scarlett smiled up at Ronan warmly. "Sláinte," she said, taking a sip of her champagne. "Sláinte," he repeated back to her. Both Ronan and Kath had moved over to London from Ireland with their families when they were just children. In the same boat as outsiders initially, they had stuck together and eventually fallen in love and married. They had lived in London most of their lives, but they held on with pride to their Irish roots. "Good Lord, is that the time?" Kath suddenly exclaimed. She patted her dark hair, done up especially for the occasion, and smoothed down the blue dress she'd bought to match the colour of her daughter's graduation gown. "We'd better make a move or we'll be late, and we can't have that now. Not on the day you girls are graduating. Come on now, Natalie, you'd best run home to your parents. They'll be wondering where you are." Yes, Mrs. Drew. Thanks for the drink, Mr. Drew. Natalie swigged some of the champagne from her glass and shot a grin at Scarlett. See you there, Scar. She hurried off, and Scarlett took another sip of her drink. Ronan smiled down at Scarlett as he pulled Kath into his embrace once more. We're both so proud of you, Scarlett, he said, emotion colouring his tone. You have no idea what today means to us. I never finished school. Never really went at all, actually. Something I always regretted. But you still did very well regardless, Dad, Scarlett replied. Look at all you've achieved. She pointedly looked around at the spacious white marble kitchen. Their house was large and opulent, a testament to how well Ronan Drew had done in his life. Well, yes, but I wouldn't have managed to build all this on my own, he replied. If it weren't for your Aunt Lily's idea for the factory. Ronan, Kath put a hand on his arm. Come now, today is about Scarlett. You're right, of course, Ronan conceded. Let's go. Scarlett turned and led the way out towards the car, her heart sinking at the mention of the factory. Her father was going to be crushed when she told him his only child was walking away from it. His only heir. She resolved to spend as much time as she could with him over the summer to soften the disappointing news. Perhaps she'd agree to work in the factory for a few weeks. As she thought this, her heart lifted slightly. This would be something she could give him at least, some quality time. Plus, the extra money she earned would come in handy when she got to Scotland. As they reached the car, she smiled at him. Her decision made, and sent up a silent prayer that this quality time would be enough to soften the blow. Chapter 2. Ronan made his way through the crowded school hall to the front row of the parents' section. As he passed, several of the parents and teachers greeted him and nodded their respect. Even at the school, the notorious Ronan Drew was treated like a local celebrity. Whilst people were aware of his line of work, or at the very least had heard rumours, they were also aware of the generous donations he'd made around the community. The area was a better place thanks to the work he'd done over the years. Ronan sidled down the row of chairs to where his sister Lily was already waiting with her twin sons. She watched with keen brown eyes as her niece found her seat among her friends. She's grown into a true beauty, that one, she said, as her brother took his place next to her. She has indeed, he replied, leaning sideways to peck her on the cheek. Lily turned towards them both. How are you keeping, Kath? She asked politely. Well, thank you, Lil. You're all joining us for lunch after this, aren't you? Of course. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Lily turned her gaze back to the front and pushed her natural tight blonde curls back off her face. She was a tidy person by nature, her outfit and makeup impeccable, but no matter what she did, her hair would not be tamed. It was something she'd had to come to terms with years before, but it still irritated her. She leaned sideways towards her son, Connor. Did you get the new schedule from Russ? She asked quietly. Yeah, he murmured. There's a load of Louis coming in from the mainland next Thursday that looks worth pursuing. Lily pursed her deep red lips. How many? Just the one truck. Killian leaned across his brother to whisper to their mother. We've got to hit this one, 'cause Connor's promised his new bird a handbag. Connor swiped at his brother, and Killian moved back into his own space with a chuckle. Lily's dark eyes flashed with annoyance. You give that cheap tart anything off that truck, and I'll give you what for Connor Drew, she said sharply. You know damn well we can't chance the goods being traced back to us. They need to be moved quickly. Connor shot his brother a murderous look, but didn't argue, knowing it was the wiser course of action. The twins were identical, even down to their choice of haircut and suit. They dressed, moved and spoke in the same way, to the point that often the only person who could tell them apart at a glance was their mother. They were also the very best of friends, and had each other's back through thick and thin. The main difference between them was that Connor was the more serious of the two, while Killian was usually the ringleader in their less sensible ventures. Blessed with the thick, dark hair of their father and their mother's brown eyes, they were handsome young men, which, partnered with their family name, ensured they suffered no lack of female attention. Everyone sat down as the graduation ceremony began and waited patiently through the lengthy speech about what bright futures their head teacher was imagining for them all. Eventually, the students began being called up. "Here she goes. Look," Connor whispered with a smile. "Our little Scarlet." "Not so little anymore," Lily reminded him. Her boys were 7 years older than their cousin, and had always looked out for her. She glanced sideways at Ronan. "So," she said, testing the water, "when's she coming to the office to talk through her options?" Kath immediately leaned across her husband with a glare. "She is not joining the family business," she hissed. "Don't you think she should be the one to decide what she's doing?" Lily shot back. "I'm her mother," Kath responded. "She's 18 years old, Kath," Lily replied. "An 18-year-old with a place at St Andrews University," Kath said, folding her arms. "Which I'm as proud of as you. But the girl doesn't need a piece of paper to show how smart she is," Lily replied. "Ladies," Ronan's gruff voice cut through the tension. "Let's just celebrate this right now, shall we?" He nodded towards the stage, where Scarlett stood with a smile on her face, and her head held proudly as she accepted her scroll. Lily settled back and clapped as her niece posed for the camera, then made her way back to her seat. Kath had been against their way of life from the start. She'd never tried to stop Ronan doing what they did. She loved and respected him too much. Lily had to grudgingly give her that. But now she wanted to keep Scarlett away from it too. She wanted to turn her into a straight shooter and protect her from all the badness in the world. But no one could be protected from this world. And Scarlett was unusually intelligent for someone her age. Recently, whenever Kath wasn't in hearing range, Lily had turned her conversations with Scarlett towards the factory, and the girl had come up with some incredible ideas to streamline and modernise. Curious, Lily had tried 1 or 2 of them out. They had almost immediately improved efficiency, and Lily had been impressed. As young as she was, with her sharp brain and thirst for business, Scarlett would be a great asset. Lily breathed in deeply and smiled at her niece as she looked over towards them. She would just have to bide her time and wait and see what happened. Chapter 3. Drawing on the slim cigarette in her hand, Lily breathed in the smoke and blew it out slowly. She stood at the back of the office, leaning against a tall filing cabinet, her arms folded across her chest as she watched the conversation unfolding in front of her. Ronan was at the desk, listening with a grave expression to the man seated opposite.
"I really don't know what you're talking about, Ronan. I turned the money over to Killian, same way I always have done."
He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down as his wide eyes darted worriedly between Ronan and Lily.
"Except that money was a few £100 light this month, weren't it, Dan?" Ronan asked with a growl.
Was it?
Dan swallowed again.
Nah, it couldn't have been. I counted it myself, I swear.
Oh, you swear, do you? Ronan laughed and turned to Lily. He swears, Lil, so he must be telling the truth. Lily smirked coldly and took another drag of her cigarette. Course he is, she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. The smile dropped from Ronan's face as he turned back to Dan and was replaced by a thunderous expression. You can swear on Mother Teresa's grave for all I care. It still counts about as much as pig shit in a pie competition. Your bag was short this month, and I ain't fucking happy about it. Ronan slammed his hand down on the desk, and Dan jumped. You know, it's really simple. You're given a set amount of money to launder through that takeaway of yours each month. You push it through for me, and you get to keep 10% for your troubles. I even threw in free protection to sweeten it for you, and it works for everyone. Or at least it always did work up until this month, when you decided to put your sticky little fingers in the cookie jar and help yourself to some of my cash. Did you really think it wouldn't be noticed? A bead of sweat formed on Dan's forehead and began to trickle down his face. I really didn't, Ronan. You've got to believe me. Why would I want to cross you? He tried to smile, but it came out as a frightened grimace. Maybe it got lost in transit. Or maybe one of the men who collect it took a little for themselves. Lily stood up abruptly, fury flashing across her face. She crossed the small office as quick as lightning and grabbed Dan's face in her hand, squeezing viciously as she snarled down at him. What did you just say? That it got lost in transit? Dan squeaked. After that, she prompted, her tone low and deadly. One of the men who collect might have taken it. Lily's grip tightened, and he cried out in pain as her nails dug into his cheeks. My boys are not thieves, Daniel, she said, her calm voice at odds with the heated anger still radiating from her expression. They are many, many things, but not that. And if I ever hear that you've said that again, I'll make you regret it in ways you can't even imagine. Do you understand? Yes, yes, Dan cried, wincing. Good. Lily released his face and returned to where she'd been standing, repositioning herself as if nothing had happened. Dan rubbed his face and glanced over at her warily. He hadn't realized the twins were her sons. It wasn't a mistake he would make again. Ronan tapped his fingers on the desk between them as he watched the other man for a few moments. You've got 3 hours to deliver the money that was short to this office. If you do not deliver within this time, you'll be gifted with 2 broken legs and our business will be fully terminated. If you do deliver, I will put this down to an oversight on this one occasion. However, if it is ever repeated, I will do a lot worse than break your legs. Do we have an understanding? Dan dropped his gaze and nodded, shaking in his seat. He never should have tried to skim from these people. He wished he'd never listened to his girlfriend, her and her stupid ideas. It wasn't something he would ever attempt to do again. Get out of my sight, Ronan spat, disgusted by the man. He watched as Dan hurried to the door. Oh, and Daniel, our protection is no longer available to you. Take that as your payment for this misunderstanding. The next time you have problems with rivals or groups of lads causing trouble, you're on your own. Dan nodded, the devastation clear on his face. Their protection had been a godsend for him and his little takeaway, nestled in the middle of the bad end of a dodgy estate. Losing it was going to cost him big time. He slipped out of the office before Ronan could change his mind and impose a heavier sentence. As the door closed, Ronan sighed, and Lily took the now empty seat opposite him. She pursed her lips and stubbed her cigarette out in the ashtray.
"You let him off too lightly," she said.
"I know, but we need him," Ronan replied. "He launders too much for us."
"If he thinks he can get off that lightly, he may try it again."
"What do you suggest?"
Lily pondered for a moment. "You've taken away his protection. Wait a few weeks, then send some kids round there to mess the place up a little. Get him to leave them a warning. Make it clear it's from you. Shake him up."
Ronan nodded. "Okay."
He eyed her subtly.
"You all right?"
"I'm fine, little brother," she replied, giving him a quick smile. "I'm fine." Ronan smiled back fondly. Lily was, by nature, a calm and collected person with a shell as hard as steel. There wasn't much that rattled her. If anything, he was the one more likely to lose his head in situations like this. But to Lily, the most important thing in the world was her family. Everything she did for them. She loved and protected them fiercely, and no matter what happened or what any of them did, she would never hear a bad word said about them from an outsider. He knew it stemmed from their childhood, this strong bond to the rest of the family. When he was only 8, their parents had died in a car crash, and they'd been left alone in the world. Lily had been 14 at the time, too young to legally care for him. The authorities had tried to take them away and split them up, but Lily had been too quick for them. She'd packed up their things and snuck him away before they'd made concrete arrangements, taking him into hiding until they gave up looking for them. Luckily for them, in the East End, children like them slipped through the cracks all the time, so it hadn't taken too long for the search to die down. She'd found a cheap room and taken on whatever work she could to pay the rent and keep them fed. She looked after him and made him feel safe, holding him close when he had nightmares and hiding the harsher realities of their existence from him as much as she could. In her spare time, she taught him from old textbooks she found cheap in charity shops, since he couldn't go to school anymore. He was her little brother, and she knew her parents would have wanted her to love and protect him, no matter what. It hadn't been an easy time for either of them, but they'd made it through relatively unscathed together, and had built up everything they had today side by side. Ronan was forever grateful for all his sister had done for him. They may not have grown up with luxuries or with anyone else, but they had always had each other, and that was all that mattered. He knew that the need for her to protect those she loved was so deeply ingrained now that she could never change. Not that he would ever want her to. She was as hard as nails on the outside, but underneath she was the most loving person he had ever known. It was a rare and wonderful combination. "When's Scarlett coming in?" Lily asked, pulling another cigarette out of the box on the desk and lighting up. She took a drag and blew out the smoke, pushing her tight blonde curls out of her face. Scarlett had still not made a decision about what she wanted to do long-term, but she'd asked if she could work in the office for a few weeks over the summer to make some extra cash. Lily had taken this as a sign that the girl was wavering. If she wanted to be in here for the summer, maybe they could persuade her to stay on for good.
"In a few days. She's just taking a little break after finishing all her exams before she starts," he replied.
"Kath still not keen?" Lily asked.
"No." He pulled a face. "I've told her that it's just for a few weeks. Nothing's decided. And it's only the factory Scarlett's getting into. Just because she's here doesn't mean she has to be involved with everything else.
Lily tilted her head to the side and raised her eyebrows at him.
Well,
he waved his hand dismissively.
If she's only here for the summer, I mean. She still hasn't confirmed what she wants to do yet, either way.
Everything is linked into this place, Ronan. All of it. Unless you put her on post duty and nothing else, she'll have to understand how it all works at the very least. And actually, she added, it will be dangerous if she doesn't. If she's in the know, she'll be able to cover things up properly if anyone comes snooping. If she's not, she could accidentally slip up. Knowledge is power after all. Ronan exhaled heavily. After several heated discussions with Kath about Scarlett coming here at all, she'd had no choice but to relent. But not before making him swear that he'd keep their daughter away from their more nefarious enterprises. He'd been loath to promise her this, knowing it would be impossible, but she'd refused to let it go. Now he felt trapped between a rock and a hard place. Lily was right. It was stupid to allow Scarlett into the business and yet keep her in the dark, even for a few weeks. It could cause all sorts of problems, and Scarlett herself would just end up confused and frustrated. But what choice did he have? If she decided to stay on, and he hoped she would, at that point he would have to go against his wife's wishes and open up his world to Scarlett. And, as elated as he'd be to bring his daughter into the fold, the argument wasn't something he was looking forward to. But for now he could keep the peace for just a little while longer. He rubbed his forehead.
"We can cross that bridge later," he said. "There's enough to keep her busy just on the paperwork side of things. Orders, updating client details. She can help with the accounts," he reeled off.
"Okay." Lily dropped it. She knew when to push and when not to, and she knew that right now Kath was putting a lot of pressure on her brother. She turned her attention back to Dan. "You know, we need to be able to pull our business instantaneously if the need arises," she said, giving Ronan a serious look. "We shouldn't have to be careful because we need someone like Dan. It makes us look weak."
"There's too much going through there to place elsewhere, though," Ronan replied. "If we push that amount through the others suddenly, it will flag up, even if we spread it thin." "We're pushing the limits as it is. I don't know any other takeaway that banks that sort of cash each week."
Lily put the cigarette to her deep red lips and took another slow drag. "Then we need to look at expanding."
"The factory isn't set up to take on any more contracts," Ronan said, shaking his head.
"That's fine," Lily argued, sitting forward. "We can plough some money into more machinery."
"There's no space."
"There is if we move what we have around and clear out the big back store. That's wasted space," Lily responded.
"Then we'd have more legitimate money coming in, which would bring more work, but still nowhere new to launder the excess from elsewhere. It doesn't solve the problem," Ronan said exasperatedly.
He sat back in his chair and frowned. "I wasn't talking about keeping it straight. We wouldn't need to actually bring on the new contracts. Just make it look like we have, which means we can launder more cash straight through here," Lily replied.
Ronan shook his head. "No, this place was supposed to stay more clean than dirty. There isn't too much going through it right now. If we get investigated, we can hide what we don't want them to see. If we do that, it increases the risk too much."
"You have to take some risk to grow, Ronan," Lily pushed.
"Some, Yes, but that's too much. I think we're better off just finding a couple more small businesses we can set up the laundry through.
Lily sighed. Ronan didn't like change. He never had. It had always been her who had dragged them up, level by level. And every time, once she'd forced him out of his comfort zone, he'd executed things perfectly. He was brilliant when he put his mind to it. But he hated her idea, and she couldn't think of any other viable options right now. It was times like this she wished she could pull Scarlett into the conversation. She was young and green, yes, but the girl had a head full of fresh new ideas that were sharp and creative. The ideas Lily had implemented of hers within the factory had been nothing less than brilliant. Scarlett was a problem solver, and that was exactly what the firm needed right now. Her phone began to vibrate across the desk between them, and she glanced at the screen. "We'll revisit this conversation," she said, giving him a hard look. Standing up, she quickly grabbed her car keys and answered the phone. "Killian, what is it?" "You need to get over here now," came the urgent voice of her son. "Things have gone tits up. It's bad, Mum. And when I say bad, I mean really fucking bad." Chapter 4. Lily turned off the road and down the dirt track that led towards the large old barn set in the middle of nowhere. They rented it from the farmer who owned the land for cash and gave no names, ensuring there was no paperwork. With no other buildings around for a couple of miles, and the barn set back from the road behind a copse of trees, it was the perfect place for them to hold stolen goods until the heat died down and they could sell them on. This was a lucrative business for them, the stealing and selling on of high-end goods. Lily had gained enough contacts over the years to be able to easily source the highly guarded planned routes for truckers transporting goods into and around the country. She carefully selected the trucks, planned out all the details, then her sons pulled the heists. It was a well-oiled operation. Sometimes they were able to get in and out of the back whilst the truckers slept. This was the easiest way, but not always possible. Other times they would stage some sort of roadblock and hold the driver at knife point while they ransacked the back. Occasionally, if the truck was small and the load was too large to move quickly, they would take the whole vehicle. This was rare, as getting rid of the truck was a mission in itself, but sometimes it was worth it. Today had been one of these instances. The truck was small, but it had been full to the brim with Louis Vuitton handbags and shoes. These sold like hotcakes on the black market, and with the route being so rural, it had been too good an opportunity to miss. The plan had been simple. Killian was to stage a breakdown in the middle of the road, and when the truck stopped and the driver got out, Connor would grab him from behind, tie him up, and leave him a few meters into the nearby woods. It was so out of the way, the chances of anyone coming across him were slim to none. They would then come back later to release him, of course, but only after they'd successfully hidden the goods and disposed of the truck. The driver would then make his long, slow way to the nearest sign of civilization and report the heist to the police. But with no truck left to scour for evidence, and the only description he'd be able to give being two men all in black with balaclavas, the case would go cold. It always did. However, this time, there'd been a problem. Lily didn't know what the problem was as yet. None of them ever discussed business over the phone, just in case anyone was listening in. She pulled the car in behind the tree line and glanced back towards the road, double-checking no one else was nearby. She flicked her curls back over her shoulder and locked her jaw before walking purposefully towards the barn. avoiding the more uneven ground and muddy patches in order to protect her black patent high heels. As she reached the door of the barn, Connor ran over and pushed her back outside. "What the hell?" Lily exclaimed. "What are you playing at?" She pulled back and straightened herself, looking at her son crossly. "Sorry, Mum," he said, glancing back in. "Why have you still got your mask on?" she asked, looking him up and down with a frown. "You'll see," he said heavily. "You need one on too." He handed her a balaclava, and she raised an eyebrow at him, unimpressed. "Go on, please." She tutted and pulled it over her head, but no matter how much she tried to tuck them in, her wild curls still stuck out the bottom. Connor made a sound of annoyance and disappeared back into the barn. A few seconds later, he reappeared holding a black zip-up hoodie. "Here, shove this on and pull up the hood. That should do it." "You are joking." Lily looked down at her outfit pointedly. At 45, Lily was as fashion-conscious as she had been 20 years before. Her slim legs were encased in a knee-length black leather pencil skirt, which was paired with a thin black turtleneck. It was a suitably sleek and daring look. "Nope, no jokes today, unfortunately," he added in an irate tone. Connor held out the offending jumper and waited. With a look of disgust, Lily grabbed it and shoved it on, doing up the zip and pulling the hood up to hide her bright gold hair. The jumper swamped her slight frame and hung almost to her knees, accentuating her shortness, but Connor knew better than to point this out. "Okay, let's go." "So now you've got me dressed like a teenage reprobate. What's going on?" "It's easier to just show you." Connor led the way into the barn and Lily followed, pausing just inside to allow her eyes to adjust to the dim light within. The truck had been backed up into the barn so that the brothers could unload the contents along the back wall. But instead of a tidy pile of designer goods, all Lily could see was Killian sat on a wooden stool, staring into the open back of the truck. The fact the truck was still here was a problem in itself. The longer it was in their possession, the higher the risk. They needed to solve whatever the problem was and get rid of it quickly. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Why haven't you started unloading?" She walked towards him. "Is it not what we were expecting? And what is that smell?" The thin, mewling cry of a baby pierced the air and stopped Lily dead in her tracks. Her dark eyes widened. "What in the devil's name—" "No, Mum," Connor said heavily. "It ain't what we were expecting at all."
Chapter 5.
"Jesus Christ!" Lily gasped as she looked around the door into the truck. Her hands flew to her mouth. In between the stacked boxes holding the goods they'd been aiming for, several bodies lay unmoving. After taking a moment to process her shock, Lily took stock of what they were dealing with. A man and a woman lay together, slightly twisted, face down. The woman's hand was gripping that of a boy who was maybe 12 or 13, and the fourth body belonged to a teenage girl, not much older. "The baby?" Lily asked. Killian pointed towards the back, and Lily shifted to look around one of the boxes. At the very back of the truck, huddled in the corner, was a little girl no more than 4 or 5 years old. Her big brown eyes stared back into Lily's, terrified. In her arms, wrapped in a dirty blanket, she clutched the baby Lily had heard cry out. Tears stung the back of Lily's eyes, and she glanced away for a moment to dispel them. She placed her hands on her hips and turned in a slow circle, taking deep breaths, before returning her gaze to the truck. "Hey," she called softly to the girl, leaning in. Before she could say any more, the girl began to scream and tried to push further back into the corner, gripping the baby as tightly as she could. The baby began to cry, distressed at the tight hold. Lily held her hands up and stepped back. "Okay, it's okay," she crooned. "I won't hurt you." "We've tried getting to her, but she just screams like that every time we go near," Connor said. "Well, of course she does," Lily answered, eyeing her sons. "Look at us. You'd be scared too, especially after all she must have been through." After a second of deliberation, Lily discarded the hoodie and pulled off the balaclava. "Mom!" Killian started. "It's fine. She's too young to give over any information that's solid enough to incriminate us. What can she say? Some blonde lady talked to her somewhere she don't know in a language she likely don't speak. She probably don't even realise the truck's been nicked. Keep yours on, though. A blonde lady with twins to your description ain't so common." Shaking out her hair, she peered back through the dark truck at the girl and smiled. "It's okay," she said softly. She picked up a bottle of water and kicked off her shoes, then pulled herself up into the truck. The girl wailed in fright once more, but this time Lily didn't pause. Carefully, stepping around the dead bodies strewn across the floor, she made her way to the back. As she moved, she tried not to breathe in through her nose. The stench was overwhelming. She kneeled down a couple of feet away from the trembling child and put the water down in front of her. She could see the girl's lips were dry, and her sunken eyes latched onto the water. "Hey, little love." Lily pulled her attention back up and then gestured towards the baby. "Can I see?" She held her arms out and the girl pulled the infant back with fresh wariness. "It's okay." Lily bit her lip and looked back at the body of the woman on the floor. She pointed to the baby and then the mother, then pointed at her sons and herself. "I'm a mummy too. Those are my babies. Let me see, eh?" She held her arms out once more and waited, giving the girl an encouraging smile. Tears fell from the child's eyes as she fought with her desperate need to drink the water against the need to protect her younger sibling. Eventually her thirst won out, and she nervously relaxed her grip. Lily slowly reached forward and took the baby from her, freeing the little girl's arms up to grab the bottle of water. She gulped it down noisily, whilst Lily unwrapped the dirty blanket holding the baby. Lily swallowed the wave of pity that came over her as she uncovered the little mite. The only thing he wore was a nappy, which was so full that he'd soiled through it and into the blanket. His ribs jutted out of his tiny chest, and his cry as she checked him over was weak. He needed milk, and soon, if he was going to survive much longer. Tossing the blanket into another corner, she called back over her shoulder, "Pass me that hoodie." Connor threw it in and she wrapped it around the baby. The girl had finished the water and was now staring at her silently. Lily stood up, the baby still in her arms, and the girl started to panic. "It's okay." She held her hand out. "Come on, come with me." The girl tentatively placed her hand in Lily's, and slowly Lily guided her out of the truck. As they passed the bodies of the people she presumed were the girl's family, Lily pulled her in under her arm and put her hand over her eyes. "Don't look, my little love. They're sleeping now," she said gently. Lily jumped down with the baby and then turned to help the girl to the floor. She gave the baby back to her and sat her down on a stool out of the way as she tried to think over what she was going to do. Watching the sorry pair, Lily's heart bled for them. The girl was skin and bones, her face sunken with hunger, and she looked like she was about to pass out. She guessed the only reason they were the last ones alive was that the parents had probably given the youngest ones the last of the food and water. They were clearly migrants who had managed to hide in the truck in the hope that they would make it here for a better life, though where from was anyone's guess. "I need to get them home," she decided out loud. "Home?" Killian questioned with a frown. "And then what?" "And then I'll feed them, bath them, get them in some clean clothes and let them sleep in a warm bed," Lily replied. "And when they're in less of a bad way, I'll take them to a hospital and leave them somewhere safe where the authorities can take them into care." "Can't you just take them there now?" he asked. This was a stupid idea in his mind, just another risk they didn't need to be taking. "Killian Drew," Lily snapped, "look at the state of them. They're this close to either their hearts giving out or dying of pure terror. They've lost everything in the world. Some comfort and care is little enough to give, and it's the right thing to do. And you should thank the good Lord that you weren't ever in a situation like this. The only real difference between you and them is where you were born, you know?" She eyed him with a hard look, and he had the grace to glance away in shame. "Of course," he agreed. "What do you need for 'em? Me and Connor can go to a shop." Lily nodded. This was more like the boy she'd raised. "I'll make you a list. Then you can stick around and watch 'em while they sleep so I can go and see Ray." "What do you need Ray for?" Connor asked with a small growl of annoyance. Ray Renshaw was their mother's long-term casual romance. He ran most of South London and was a force to be reckoned with, which was the only reason the brothers hadn't seen him off over the years. "We need a clean-up crew," Lily replied, ignoring the underlying tone in her son's voice. She glanced back into the lorry and shook her head. "We need this dealt with." The brothers looked at each other. "We'll clean it up. You don't need Ray," Killian said. "No, I don't want you touching this." "Oh, come on. It ain't like we haven't dealt with a body before, and no one will be looking for these ones," Connor protested. "I'm well aware of your past experiences with bodies, Connor," Lily replied, her patience waning. "And if this was just the one body, it would be fine. 2, sure, okay, we'd figure it out. But there are 4 bodies in there. 4, she repeated sharply. "I'm asking Ray to lend us a clean-up crew, and that will be the end of it. Are we clear?" Connor sighed irritably and began shutting up the truck. Killian saluted with a wry smile. When their mother used that calm tone with a sharp edge, there was to be no further argument. They all knew who was in charge here. Good. Walking back over to the girl, she placed a hand on her shoulder before gently taking the baby. "Come," she beckoned, waiting for her to follow. As she walked the orphaned children out to her car, Lily exhaled heavily. This was not how this heist was supposed to have gone down. Even if she could sort the bodies out quickly, they still needed to get rid of the truck in good enough time to go and release the driver from where they'd left him tied up. The clock was ticking, and the risk increased with every second. Glancing up to the skies, she said a silent prayer that she could sort this latest nightmare out without any more surprises. Chapter 6. Lily stepped out of the taxi and stared up at the large dark brick building. The St. Heliers Tavern was notorious, not just in the local area, but throughout London. If you weren't part of the underworld, and on the right side of that underworld, it was far from safe to set foot inside. For Lily Drew, though, it was just another day in the life. Stepping forward, she approached the front door and marched in. The chatter inside the busy pub paused for a moment, before resuming as its current inhabitants registered her as one of their own. She smiled at the barman, who inclined his head to the side to indicate Ray was in his usual booth. With a nod of thanks, Lily made her way over to the end of the pub where she knew she would find him. She heard him before she saw him through the crowds of people. It was Friday night, the busiest night of the week for this particular venue. As she caught a glimpse, she could see he was entertaining at his table. 2 of his men and a few young women sat around him, hanging off his every word as he shared his latest joke.
And then he said...
Ray's craggy voice tailed off as he caught sight of Lily. His rugged face lit up.
Well, if it ain't my siren of the underworld, he said with a grin. Lily Drew.
Hello, Ray, she said, reaching the table. She waited.
Right, go on then,
Ray said to the group of people around him.
Fuck off.
No one needed to be told twice. The group dispersed and Ray rose to greet Lily properly.
You're a sight for sore eyes, he said, leaning forward to kiss her.
She turned her head to the side, ensuring the kiss landed on her cheek, then allowed him to lead her to a seat. Your views seem to be well enough without me, she replied, getting comfortable.
No view is ever well enough without you in it, Lil.
Ray smiled, a warm, genuine smile. Ray had been in love with Lily, and indeed she him for many years, and the 2 of them shared a relationship of sorts. But Lily always kept him carefully at arm's length, and refused to call what they had anything more than a friendship with benefits. It had been this way for as long as she could remember, despite his ongoing and unsuccessful attempts to turn it into something more. He never gave up trying, though, and every time she pushed him back, he would gracefully retreat and claim in good humour that tying her down and making an honest, or at least fairly honest, woman of her was one of the few failures of his life.
So, Ray signalled to the barman, to what do I owe the pleasure this evening?
Lily smiled back at him. He was in a good mood, as she'd hoped.
It's not a social call, I'm afraid. I need your help with something. What do you need?
Ray sat back and rested his arm across the back of the booth. If he was surprised, he hit it well. Fiercely independent, Lily very rarely asked for help, and when she did, it was serious. Lily briefly took in his appearance with a look of approval. Ray always looked good. He was dressed impeccably, his black suit teamed with a crisp white shirt, its top 2 buttons open, a hint of chest hair peeping out at the top. His strong jaw was shaded with stubble, and his blue eyes twinkled under a pair of dark eyebrows. She wasn't fooled by the calm appearance he displayed. She knew Ray better than anyone. His mood could swing on a sixpence if something was to rile him. He was as dangerous as they came, but he was also loyal to a fault to those he cared about. And she was lucky enough to fall into that category. Although she'd witnessed the hurricane of destruction that Ray Renshaw could create in a rage, she had never been in the line of fire.
I need you to lend me a clean-up crew,
she said quietly, her eyes sliding sideways as she spoke, checking they weren't being overheard. Ray's eyebrows rose in surprise. That wasn't what he'd been expecting.
Why?
He asked. Lily crossed her slim legs and pulled out her cigarettes as the barman reached the table with their drinks. She lit up and took a long drag, blowing the smoke out in a thin line as he walked back to the bar. She leaned forward and picked up the glass of white wine, taking a sip before she spoke. "The boys picked up a truck earlier today," she started.
"All right, what have they done then?" Ray asked with a deep laugh.
Lily's eyes flashed and she sat up straight. "They've not done a thing," she replied sharply, not liking his tone. Ray's laugh trailed off and he nodded for her to continue. She relaxed her shoulders. "It was a big load, small lorry, so they took the lot. But some illegals had snuck in the back and copped it en route. I've got 4 bodies that need disposing of." She didn't mention the children she'd taken back to her house. There was no need. It didn't concern Ray. It didn't concern anyone outside of their family. Ray gave a long, low whistle, then took a sip of his brandy.
"How are you planning to get shot of the truck?" he asked.
"Chop shop. Can't exactly send it with them still inside," she answered.
"No."
Ray rubbed his hand over his lip as he thought it through. "It's a big ask," Lily said, leaning forward. "But you know I wouldn't come to you if I didn't need to. And I'll make it worth your while." Ray waved his hand dismissively.
"I'm not going to charge for helping you out." He rolled his eyes. "You're my woman, for God's sake."
"Good friend," Lily corrected.
"Oh, Lil, you kill me. You really do," Ray said, shaking his head. "Course I'll lend you a crew. How soon do you need this sorted?"
"Tonight. The driver's still tied up."
"Fuck's sake."
Ray ran his hand through his hair and then laughed.
"Well, there's one thing I can always say about you, Lily Drew."
He stared at her fondly.
"You never let things get boring."
Chapter 7. Lily returned home with a tight knot of anxiety in her stomach. She'd given Ray the location and he'd sent the crew over to take the bodies away and dispose of them. How, she didn't know or care. She trusted Ray and knew that his men were efficient enough to deal with the situation swiftly and securely. But the truck had been sitting in the barn for hours longer than it was supposed to have been, and the driver was still tied up in the woods. At least she hoped he was. Every second that went by was one more second that someone could happen across the man and release him. It was unlikely, but not impossible. She hung her keys on the hook behind the front door as she closed it and entered the lounge where her son sat waiting. "Have they woken?" she asked.
"The baby did, but I gave him more milk like you said, and he went back down," Killian answered. "The girl hasn't stirred at all."
"Good. She needs rest, poor mite. Listen, you stay here with them. Connor, you come with me. We've got a lot to do." Without waiting to hear the protest she knew would escape Killian's lips, she turned and marched back out. An hour later, Lily and Connor pulled up to the barn and cut the engine. They stepped out. It was dark, the moon hidden by thick cloud, and without the artificial lights they were used to in the city, they had to squint to make out Ronan's broad figure as he ambled towards them.
"They've just left, about 10 minutes ago," he said as he reached them. "It's clear. The truck can go. Steve's at the chop shop waiting. He just needs a 5-minute heads up to get the gate open, as it's all locked up for the night."
"Okay." Lily nodded and walked into the barn. The truck sat where they'd left it earlier. Clear now the goods had been stacked neatly against the back wall by Ronan, and the bodies and accompanying items had been removed by Ray's men. "Connor, take my car and get to the driver. I'll confirm when the drop-off is done and you can set him loose," Lily ordered. "Ronan,
Do you want to drive the truck and I'll follow in your car?
Sure, he replied. I've switched the plates already, so let's get on the road.
He checked his watch with a frown, then jumped up into the cab of the truck. Lily nodded to Connor. "You stay in touch now," she said, "and hurry."
"Will do."
As Connor jogged back out to the car, a heavy feeling settled in her stomach. Was the worst of the night over? She prayed to the heavens that it was. Connor pulled off the road onto the grass verge of the narrow country lane and stepped out, pulling the balaclava back over his head. He rubbed his arms as the chill of the evening seeped through his clothes, then walked briskly down the road a few meters before entering the dark wood. Pulling out his phone, he turned on the torch, unable to see anything at all under the canopy of leaves, blocking out what little light the cloudy night provided. He shone it around, trying to find the marks he'd left earlier to lead him back to the driver. Eventually, after checking several trees, he found what he was looking for and tramped deeper into the woods. The dried leaves and twigs underfoot crackled as he moved, which he knew would alert the driver to his presence. He waited for the expected call of help. This was about the time they all started calling for help. But no sound came, and Connor frowned. He paused for a moment and listened. Perhaps due to the late hour and the darkness that engulfed them, the driver was too scared to call out. Usually they wouldn't have left him alone and bound for so long. It was normally still light when they released them.
"Oi!"
he called out, making his voice intentionally gruff so it was less recognizable. Silence.
"It's time to go!"
he called again. Still no reply. He tutted in annoyance and continued towards where he thought he remembered leaving the man. He turned the phone slowly, shining the torch on each tree until he found the rope they'd left tied around the trunk. Making his way over, he flicked out his knife, ready to cut through it and let the man trussed up around the other side go free. Once or twice they'd tried their luck when they'd been freed, but most of the time they just ran for the hills straight away. This guy wouldn't be any trouble, he wagered. He was a lot older and weedy to boot.
"Come on then, let's get these off ya."
Connor tailed off, and his jaw dropped in horror as he rounded the tree to where he'd left the driver hours before. The rope was still secured to the tree trunk, but the man whose wrists and ankles had been bound by it was gone. He kneeled down next to the frayed end and picked it up, aghast.
"What the fuck?" he breathed.
As his gaze dropped, it landed on a small flat stone with a sharp edge. His mind quickly pieced together what must have happened, and he groaned. Quickly, Connor used the knife in his hand to saw through the remaining rope. He had no idea how long he had before the police arrived here to sweep the scene for evidence, and he certainly wasn't leaving it behind as a gift. Pulling it away from the tree, he grabbed the stone for good measure and began to run through the trees, back the way he'd come. The ground was uneven and he stumbled, but soon righted himself without stopping. He needed to get out of here, and quickly. Reaching the car, he slid to a stop and flung the door open before jumping in and turning the key faster than he ever had before in his life. The big black Mercedes roared to life, and he slammed his foot down on the accelerator, turning it around with a kick of the back wheels before screeching off down the road. Racing away, he paid no mind to the speed limit, knowing only that he needed to put as much distance as he could between that place and himself before the police swarmed in. He tapped at the backlit screen in the centre console and found his mother's number. "Come on, come on, come on," he muttered, his tone laden with frustration. He had no idea how long it had been since the driver had escaped. He hadn't yet led the police back to the woods, but that didn't mean he hadn't already reported it. He could be there in the station now, telling them everything about the hijacking and his subsequent kidnapping. They could have already have sent out an alert about the truck. It would be the first thing they did. And if they'd already done that, every police patrol within 100 miles would be on the lookout for it. Lily finally picked up. "Connor." Her calm voice filled the car as she greeted him. "He's not there!" Connor yelled, his panic finally coming to the fore. "The truck's hot! Get the fuck off the road, now!"
Chapter 8.
Lily's dark eyes widened, and her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as she heard Connor's panicked warning come down the line. She ended the call without wasting time answering him and immediately dialed Ronan's number, her red lips forming a grim line. The phone began to ring, and she waited for him to pick up.
"Come on, Ronan,"
she whispered, staring at the tail of the truck. She backed off slightly and checked all her mirrors once more for any sign of the police. They were coming into a more built-up area now, where there were traffic and cameras, and despite the fact they'd changed the number plate to avoid being picked up on that, if the police were already alerted to a stolen truck of this description, they could still be pulled over.
"What's up, Lil?"
Ronan finally answered. "The driver's gone, and we don't know how long he's been gone for, so the truck may already have been reported," she said quickly.
"Shit,"
Ronan cursed. There was a long silence, and Lily waited for him to think things over. It was ultimately his decision as to how they would handle this, as he was the one in the hot seat.
"It's too late to turn back," he said eventually. "If we turn around, we'd spend more time getting this back into hiding than we would if we just deliver it. We're going to have to risk it."
"You're sure?" Lily asked. "We could find a quiet car park and hide out until the search dies down."
"We'd be sitting ducks. They'll search the car parks and our DNA will be all over this. It needs to be destroyed tonight."
Lily nodded to herself in the darkness. Ronan was right. "Okay, let's just get there." They turned onto the slip road that led them to the South Circular, a busy road teeming with police cars at the best of times, but one they could no longer avoid at this point in their journey. Lily's hands tightened once more on the wheel, and her heart began to race. "This is it now, Ronan," she said heavily. "The final stretch. Just a couple of junctions, and we're there."
"I hope to God that's all there is to it," he replied quietly.
Lily exhaled slowly. She could hear the tension in her brother's voice. He was worried, and rightly so. They were more vulnerable than they had ever been right now, and every second that passed felt like a minute. They joined the busy dual carriageway, and Lily carefully edged out into the second lane, coming up alongside the truck. She slowed slightly, so as not to leave him behind. "Hey," she said, glancing sideways at him with what she hoped was an encouraging smile. "Nearly there. I'm going to go now and ring Steve, okay? Let him know to open up ready for us."
"Sure, tell him that." "Shit."
Lily glanced sideways at him again and saw him staring into the wing mirror with an expression of horror. She looked through her rear view and saw what he'd spotted. A patrol car had just pulled up behind her. "It's going to be okay, Ronan," she said, her tone much calmer and more confident than she felt. "They're not looking at us." But as she said this, one of them began eyeing the truck.
"They're looking, Lily,"
Ronan replied, his tone becoming urgent.
"They're definitely fucking looking."
"All right, just calm down," she said, watching the car. They were indeed looking at the truck and had begun chatting between themselves. "It's going to be okay." But even as she said it, she wasn't so sure this was true. Up ahead was a set of traffic lights, and as they approached the junction, the lights turned red. They had no choice but to slow both vehicles, and Ronan began almost incoherently cursing in panic. Lily glanced back at the patrol car again and watched as one of them looked down towards the screen in his hands. He was about to run the plates, she realised. And if he ran the plates, he would see that they were fake, and then Ronan would definitely be pulled over, whether it had been reported yet or not. She swore under her breath and made a swift decision. "Ronan, just call Steve and get the truck there," she ordered. "I've got you covered." Without waiting for a reply, she ended the call and put the car into gear. Slamming her foot down on the accelerator, she pulled the car forward with a screech of the wheels and sped through the red light and on down the road. As expected, the patrol car immediately set off after her, blue lights and siren coming on a moment later. She watched them in her rear view as she continued picking up speed. As Ronan and the truck became smaller in the distance, she slowed and turned down a side road, pulling to a stop a few meters down as the patrol car caught up. She switched off the engine and got out of the car. "Is everything okay, officers?" she asked, giving a broad smile as they ran over. Chapter 9. Scarlett stared down at the St. Andrews prospectus once more, studying the eager, happy faces of the students on the cover as she lay on top of the bed. They looked so happy. She let herself imagine them all going for lunch together and heading to the vaulted library to study as exams loomed. But then she let the image go. They were models just posing for the brochure. Dropping the pages, she stared off into the distance and began to picture herself instead making new friends and new memories, and her mouth curled up into a smile. Her back began to ache, so she sat up, twisting her legs up underneath her. Her gaze came to rest on a picture of her family that she kept by the bed, and her smile softened. Going to St. Andrews meant leaving them. The thought sent a stab of pain through her heart, and she sighed. How was she going to take this next step in her life without the people who meant the most by her side? They wouldn't even be around the corner. They would be in a whole different country. She looked down at the prospectus again, and the smiling faces suddenly didn't appear so welcoming. What would the people be like? She wondered. St. Andrews was one of the most prestigious universities in the UK. She had earned her place through impeccable grades, but it was a place where royalty had been. How on earth was she supposed to fit in with people like that? Scarlett Drew, a girl from the East End whose father ran a criminal empire. Would they see the darkness inside her? Memories flickered. The memory of her father teaching her the rules of surviving the underworld. The memory of Aunt Lily pulling the trigger on the man in the lounge. As that played out in her mind, the shot rang out as loudly in her head as it had that day. She wasn't normal like the other students. She lived in a world and had seen things that none of them would have ever experienced. Would that be obvious? The other students might be naive and kind, or they might rally against the obvious outsider, and she'd be going in alone. It wouldn't be like walking into the family business. Once more the reminder of all she was throwing away came forth, and she sighed. It was everything her father wanted. Her to take her rightful place alongside him and her aunt and cousins, and she'd fit right in, among people who loved her in a world she already understood. But despite how easy that would be, she couldn't let go of her curiosity. She needed to go to St. Andrews. She needed to start her own adventure and carve her own path in life, whatever that may be. But first, she needed to find the courage to tell her father. Scarlett rubbed her forehead, pushed her long dark hair back, and stared into the mirror on the wall. A pair of solemn grey-blue eyes stared back at her. Then her vision split, presenting two versions of herself side by side, the two versions that lived inside her body, that tore at her heart so. They both looked exactly the same as she studied them, except for one thing, their choice of weapon. In one's hand there was a degree, a first with honours listed after her name, and in the other's was a gun. Chapter 10. The double doors opened in front of Lily, revealing the bright summer sunshine. Killian was waiting in his car in the side street nearby. She opened the door and slipped in beside him, discarding the hat and scarf that had been carefully hiding her identity as he drove off into the busy London traffic. "All okay?" he asked. "Fine," she replied. She turned to look out of the window, swallowing the lump in her throat as the feeling of the trusting little girl's hand still lingered on her palm. She had just dropped the two children off in the waiting room of the children's hospital, wrapped up warm in new clothes with full stomachs, a bag of supplies and a note explaining that they had been found on the side of a road alone and that they spoke no English. It had been one of the hardest things she'd ever done, leaving them alone, but they would be noticed soon enough and given the help they needed. She prayed they would be kept together and given a loving home someday. The feel of the little girl's hand in hers had also brought forth memories of holding another little hand. Her daughter, Ruby, had once been a sweet, innocent child too. She had looked up to her with the same trust and held on tight, never pulling away. But that had been a very long time ago, and the woman she had grown into was a complete stranger to Lily. Ruby Drew was a year younger than the twins, but unlike her brothers, who Lily saw every day, Ruby only turned up when she wanted something. And even then it was usually with an insult or an argument. Her choices in life were a constant source of heartache for Lily, but after years of trying and failing to help her, she'd had to accept that Ruby was a soul who was determinedly set on a path of self-destruction, and nothing she could do would stop her. "Come on, let's pick up your brother," she said, pushing thoughts of Ruby back out of her mind. They only led to worry, and worrying never seemed to help in this particular case. "We've got work to do, sorting out last night's haul. I think a lot of it will have to go through the back doors," she mused, purposely pushing her mind towards work. "You don't want it going through the markets?" Killian asked resentfully. Many of the items they stole were carefully filtered down through a string of market stalls they owned, but some things were better suited to other black market channels. Certain shops had a secret back room reserved for select customers who were in the know. High-end goods tended to trade better here and reach a higher price, though they didn't own these places, so they lost a percentage to the trader. This was a safer option, and they did well out of it, but Killian resented handing over so much of their profit to someone else after they'd done all the hard work and taken the majority of the risks. He made no secret of his feelings either, and so Lily shot him a look to let him know she'd noted his tone. "You know it's too high-end for that." Killian grumbled, but didn't bother complaining. It wouldn't get him anywhere. "By the way, I think Connor's having a lie-in today," he said. "It was a late night," he added, seeing his mother's eyebrows shoot upwards. "Yes, it was, for all of us," she replied. "He can rest tomorrow when the work is done. Today we need to move, he knows that." "Yeah, but I mean..." Killian's chiselled jaw opened and shut as he tried to locate a good excuse for his brother so Lily would leave him in peace, but he couldn't seem to find one. Lily glanced sideways at her handsome son and eyed his face critically. "What's going on with this constant 5 o'clock shadow you've got going on lately?" she asked. "Has your razor broken?"
"It's called designer stubble, and the girls love it."
He raised his eyebrows with a wink and a cocky smile. "Oh, yeah?" Lily laughed, the lines around her eyes crinkling up prettily. "Who told you that, then?"
"Loads of 'em, Mum," he replied. "That Tracy from the hairdressers."
"The redhead you finished with a few weeks ago?" Lily interjected.
"Yep, her. Then there's Sandy from the bar at Ronnie's. Chastity, Connor's bit of stuff."
"Chastity?" Lily snorted derisively. "That girl wouldn't know the meaning of the word if it hit her in the face with a—" "Oh," she rounded on Killian as the penny suddenly dropped. "That's what he's really doing this morning, ain't it?" she demanded. "He's got that bit of skirt round wasting his time when he should be out bloody working." Killian groaned as he realised he'd accidentally dropped his brother right in it. There was a lot that Lily would forgive her sons, but not neglecting the business in favour of a girl. Never that, especially this one. Chastity had a reputation around the estate she lived on for being not only an easy ride, but a Class A gold digger too. Something that had been brought to Lily's attention when she'd set her sights on Connor. She'd left behind a string of ex-boyfriends who had been rinsed and dumped as soon as their pockets were empty, along with a few who swore blind she'd robbed them in the process. But Connor seemed unfazed by this for some reason Lily couldn't fathom. "Right, put your foot down and get us there now. I'm not having that flash in the pan stopping him from helping out today," Lily ordered, annoyed. Both her boys had always kept up a steady, fast-moving string of girls, and they were always the wrong sort in her opinion. But the fact they got bored easily meant that she never had to endure any one of them for too long. Unfortunately, though, despite Lily's findings, Chastity had been around for a little longer than most.
"Yes, Mum."
10 minutes later, they pulled up outside Connor's block of flats. Lily marched into the building and went up via the lift to her son's floor. Pulling her key out of her purse, she unlocked the door, and Killian groaned behind her.
"Come on, Mum, at least knock."
"I certainly will not," Lily responded indignantly, pursing her red lips together. The door swung open into Connor's open-plan living room, and she stalked in, pulling herself up to full height. Connor froze on his way into the lounge from the kitchen, carrying 2 cups of tea in nothing but his boxers. His brown eyes widened in guilty shock as he saw his mother standing there, her expression furious.
"Hello, Mum,"
he said flatly.
"Don't you hello me,"
Lily replied, placing her hands on her slender hips. "Getting your brother to tell me how tired you are when there's work to be done. And really, you're here entertaining." She purposely ignored the half-naked blonde curled up on her son's sofa.
"Oh, come on, Mum, it's Saturday, for God's sake,"
he complained with an edge of annoyance. He shot Killian a murderous look. He really was tired after all the events of the previous night, and could have done with the morning off. "Exactly," she countered, "which is the best day of the week for eager shoppers." She gave him a meaningful look. As much as she knew Chastity was aware of their general business, she didn't want to say too much in front of the girl. She could already see the calculated gleam in the girl's eye as she watched her in her peripheral vision. "So, we need to get things moving now, before the rush of the day." Connor sighed. There was no point fighting it. She was right. They needed to get all the designer shoes and handbags in the back doors of the black market shops before midday if they hoped to shift them on quickly. And he knew this would be the plan without needing to ask. Their haul was too highbrow for the markets. Lily saw the resignation sink in and relaxed her shoulders. "Right, get dressed then. We don't have all day."
"Actually, Mrs. Drew,"
Chastity piped up from the couch in a girlish tone that irritated Lily straight away.
"we're going out shopping today, aren't we, babe?"
She gave Lily a smug smile.
"There's a gorgeous bracelet I've seen that I want to show Connor."
"Oh, yeah," Lily said dryly. "And why's that, then?" Chastity blinked.
"Why's what?"
"Why do you want to show Connor?" Lily raised an eyebrow and waited.
"Well, because I like it,"
she replied, glancing over to Connor in the hope he would chime in. "Then go buy it and show it off to him later," Lily said sharply. "Though I can't imagine he'd be much interested in seeing it. He doesn't wear bracelets himself." Chastity's cheeks flooded with colour as Lily called her out. She'd obviously wanted to show Connor in the hope that he would buy it for her, because it was far too expensive a piece for her own wallet. Killian walked over to the window and looked out across the smoky rooftops below as they waited for Connor to dress. Lily folded her arms and began pacing, keeping one subtle eye on the scantily covered girl on the sofa. Chastity was watching her with a sly gaze. Lily knew what was going through her mind. She saw her as a threat to her setup with Connor. Lily was the only thing that could get in the way of her access to his wallet, like it had today, which meant that she was about to go one of two ways. Either she would fight, make some sort of stand and try to pitch Connor against her, or she would try to befriend her to carve out some sort of position for herself in their family in order to cement her ongoing access to his wallet. Neither of which would work, but Lily was curious to see which option she would choose. Connor reappeared, doing up the last button of his shirt, and made a beeline for his suit jacket hanging by the door. Killian immediately fell into step beside him, and Lily waited for Connor to shrug on the jacket.
"Mrs. Drew?"
Chastity began, her tone loaded. Here we go, Lily thought.
"I was thinking,"
she smiled, the sweetness of the action so fake Lily almost rolled her eyes.
"why don't I cook us all a nice roast dinner tomorrow, here at Connor's flat? We could all sit down and get to know each other better, couldn't we?"
Her naturally whiny tone set Lily's teeth on edge, and she tried not to grind them. She looked at Connor, who hid a smile and ducked out before she answered. He knew exactly how this was going to go. She turned to Chastity as her boys disappeared through the door. "Sundays are reserved for family, sweetheart," she said, her expression cold. Following her sons, she called back over her shoulder, "So fuck off back to yours." Chapter 11. As Ronan pulled into his sister's drive, he welcomed the relief he knew would come once they walked into Lily's house for the weekly family get-together. Kath wouldn't carry on in there, or at least he hoped she wouldn't. She'd been unrelentingly vocal on the drive over about Scarlett spending the summer working at the factory. It was tradition in their family to all get together for Sunday lunch after church each week, no matter what was going on. The only person who was routinely absent was Ruby, but other than her, everyone was expected to be in attendance, unless they had a very good reason not to be. It was an important tradition to Ronan and Lily. After their parents had died, family time had become more precious than ever. So now, each Sunday, Lily and Kath took it in turns to host.
"Lil, crack that open, will ya?"
Ronan greeted his sister heartily as she opened the door and handed her a bottle of red wine.
"All right, you two?"
he said, once in the large kitchen where he knew the twins would likely be hanging around in the wait for lunch.
"Pucker, thanks, Uncle Ro,"
Cillian answered through a mouthful of bread. Lily walked in with the wine and slapped his hand as he reached for another slice.
"Get off it, you gannet.
Here, open this and pour a glass for your uncle. See what everyone else wants to drink too." She made her way back around the large white marble counter and continued mixing up the gravy.
"Hello, Scar,"
Cillian called warmly as their cousin entered. Scarlett smiled broadly as she joined him, and Kath came in quietly behind her, pursing her lips and throwing Lily a tight smile as she hung her coat and tried to let go of her worries for a while.
"Hey, Cillian," Scarlett replied. "Hey, Connor." "No Ruby today?" she asked, looking around warily.
No Ruby," Lily responded without looking up. Scarlett visibly relaxed and sat down on one of the breakfast stools dotted along the large kitchen island. She never voiced it aloud, but Ronan knew she couldn't stand her cousin Ruby. She didn't rock up to family Sundays very often, but when she did, she always created unnecessary drama and ruined the lunch for everyone.
"So, you all set to start at the factory tomorrow, then?" Connor asked.
"Yeah, all set," Scarlett replied eagerly. "Looking forward to jumping in and making some extra cash."
"Oh, take a glass of that wine, Cillian," Kath said suddenly, gesturing at the bottle in his hand.
"Me too,"
Lily chimed in. She smiled at Kath. "We can have a toast to the next exciting chapter in the family. No more kids at school now, eh, Kath? Feels a bit crazy that they're all grown up." Kath couldn't help but smile fondly, clearly remembering all the children when they were younger.
"Yeah, it's a bit weird, ain't it? No more homework, no more toys to trip over at every turn."
Still, Lily took the freshly poured glasses from Cillian and handed one to Kath, chinking hers to it. "There's still all their bloody washing to keep us busy, eh?" They both cackled with amusement, the sound of their laughter filling the room, and Ronan smiled. The bee in his wife's bonnet had been subdued, for now at least. His gaze moved to his sister, and he caught the wink she shot him. He nodded subtly in gratitude. They always had each other's back, him and Lily, even in the little things.
"Right."
Kath took a swig of her wine and placed it back down on the counter.
"Come on, Scarlett, let's help your aunt get all this to the table."
She picked up a plate of vegetables, and Scarlett dutifully followed suit. As they walked away, Lily went back to adding the finishing touches, so Ronan turned his head to work.
"So, how did we do yesterday?"
"Very well once we actually got there." Lily shot Connor a look, and he swiftly busied himself with laying the table. "More than half the stock is already gone. About another 20% is aside on a promise, and the rest is such good stuff I doubt it'll sit through another weekend. Should all be gone and the money in our pocket by next Sunday."
"Christ, that's good,"
Ronan replied, raising his dark eyebrows in surprise. "It was a perfect haul. Well, other than the obvious issues," she added. "There was no shit to get rid of, all popular items."
Good.
Ronan nodded, and his eyebrows knitted together as he thought over the implications of this. Lily read his expression and followed his thought process correctly. "Ro, we need to talk about expanding the factory."
"Lil, I've told you, I don't want to keep shitting on our own doorstep."
Ronan exhaled heavily and ran a hand back through his hair, agitated. "We can't keep pushing through so many little businesses. And we've tapped out pretty much all the viable locals anyway, Lily argued. I know you don't want the added risk, but unless you want to downsize our business, then we have to come up with a decent laundry for the excess. She held her hands out to the side, exasperated. There are no other options, Ronan. She glanced through at Scarlett as her niece laid the potatoes on the table. She so greatly wanted to pick that sharp mind of hers. She may even have an answer in there that neither of them had considered. But unless Scarlett chose to join them, her smart brain and all of its brilliant ideas would be leaving them very soon. Ronan sighed and looked away, biting the inside of his cheek. She was right. They had to do something, and it couldn't be a short-term fix. It wasn't that he'd been ignoring the problem. He just didn't want to dirty the factory any more than they already were.
I know, he said. Look, I have an idea, but I need to look into it more before we sit and discuss it. Give me a few days and then we'll revisit this, okay?
Lily raised her eyebrows and gave him a long, hard look. Okay, she replied. As long as we do, Ronan, because we're vulnerable with that much cash sitting around. I don't like it. We need it filtered off with a paper trail as soon as possible.
I hear ya, Ronan replied, picking up the gravy and walking through to the dining room. Now come on, it's Sunday. Let's focus on what's important, yeah?
Of course. Lily sighed inwardly as she watched Ronan's retreating back. He was right. Family was the most important thing in the world, especially on a Sunday. But what Ronan didn't seem to grasp was that this was exactly why she needed to focus on work at all times and never stop, not for anything. Because everything they did to get and to hide their money was for the family. Chapter 12. Hours later, Lily stood at the front door, waving off the last of the family. They had eaten, drunk, laughed and talked. All in all, it had been a very enjoyable afternoon and evening. The twins had had them all in stitches with their terrible tales, and the rather embellished version of Lily's rejection of Chastity's Sunday dinner offer had become the favourite funny story of the night. Now they were all finally leaving to go home, and Lily was ready to unwind and go to bed. She waved until the last pair of tail lights disappeared around the corner, and then began to turn, until a parked car in the distance caught her eye. She squinted to make out the number plate. Then a knowing smile crept up on her red lips. Thoughts of heading to bed abandoned, she turned and walked into the house, locking the door behind her. Ray sat in the dark in the large armchair in the corner of the office and waited, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He heard the door close, and then smiled in amusement as he listened to her methodically searching the downstairs rooms for him. Eventually she reached the office. The light went on, and there she was in all her glory, hands on hips and chin held high in natural defiance. A thrill rippled through him, as it always did, the same way it had for nearly 30 years. His gaze roamed over her, drinking her in like she was the last glass of water in the desert. She wore one of her customary black knee-length leather skirt and black top ensembles, her signature look. It was classic, timeless, yet daring and forward, much like she was herself. Her mass of wild blonde curls stood proud and glorious, paying no mind to gravity. He knew she wasn't a fan of her hair, untamable as it was, but he loved it. The feel of it beneath his fingers and the sight of it on the pillow beside him gave him great joy. His gaze finally rested on her face. Her perfect red lips held a hint of a smile, and her dark brown eyes bore into him, concealing 100 secrets that he would never know. Maybe this was why he could never get enough of her, because she was the one woman he would never truly see laid bare. "And what, may I ask, do you think you're doing, sneaking into my house as though we're kids again?" she asked, her tone loaded with amusement. Ray smiled, his rugged face crinkling up handsomely with the action.
"Don't you remember when you used to make me sneak in when we were young so that Ronan wouldn't see me?"
Lily laughed. "I do," she replied. "Though I think it's safe to assume he knows about you now," she added.
"Of course, but it's much more fun to act like he doesn't."
They stared at each other across the room for a few moments. The invisible connection they'd always had pulling them together.
"Did everything go okay on Friday, after my clean-up crew left?" Ray asked.
"It did." Lily crossed to the side of the room where her drinks trolley sat and poured herself a brandy. "There were a couple of hiccups, but it all worked out."
"Hiccups?" he asked.
"Nothing major," she replied. "I earned 3 points on my licence, but it was a small price to pay, considering. Everything is nicely under control." She placed the stopper back in the crystal bottle of brandy and moved to sit down in the chair nearest Ray.
"As always," he said wryly. "I think I've yet to see the day when Lily Drew doesn't have things nicely under control."
"What can I say?" She shrugged. "That's just how I roll." He laughed.
"It is. I wish you'd roll a little closer to me, though."
He narrowed his eyes with a smile, testing the water.
"You know, I'm still determined to make a slightly more honest woman out of you one day."
"And I'm still determined to stay as independently dishonest as they come," Lily immediately replied, her words as smooth as glass. Ray nodded slowly, and then let his mask drop, revealing an expression of raw honesty.
"Come on, Lil," he said. "I don't get it. We've spent years doing this dance. You know I love you. You know I'd move heaven and earth for you. You're the only woman I have ever seen as an equal. The only person I've ever wanted to share my life with. And I know you feel the same. This thing we have. Are we really going to go on through life not properly grabbing hold of it? Not ever taking some enjoyment for ourselves?"
Lily looked down into her glass, her heart dropping. She hated it when he did this. It was hard for both of them, because the truth was she felt exactly the same. They shared something neither of them had ever felt with anyone else. If she'd believed in the concept of soulmates, then he would have been hers. But whilst they could enjoy each other from a distance, she could never commit to him. Not in the way he wanted. Ray wanted it all, the whole shebang, marriage, a home together, a shared life. But that meant she would have to share his life, not the other way around. Ray ran a much bigger firm than hers, and he couldn't leave it. But on the flip side, she couldn't leave hers either. Ronan wouldn't be able to drive their firm to where it needed to be on his own, and there was no one to take over from her. Not yet, anyway. If she gave in to her own selfish desires and left this family to float without her undivided attention, it would sink. And she hadn't spent her entire life building it up for it to fail. "Ray," she said softly, "you know I can't leave."
"But you wouldn't be leaving, Lil," he pressed. "You'd still be able to work as much as you like. Just because you moved south of the river, that doesn't mean you would be abandoning your family."
We both know if I'm down there with my skills as your wife, you'll want me working alongside you. Come on, admit it. You would."
Ray tilted his head to the side. "I won't deny it would be great having you around for that too, but nothing else needs to change, Lil. We'd just be grabbing happiness with both hands for once, rather than snippets of time here and there when we can."
"You know where I stand, Ray," she replied firmly, "and I won't be swayed. Maybe one day things will be different. Maybe one day I'll retire, but right now, I can't."
Ray took a deep breath and sighed, then took a long drink of his whiskey. He shouldn't have brought it up. It wasn't why he'd come to try and convince her for the 100th time to give in. He knew there was no point, not now anyway. He should have just stayed quiet and enjoyed his time with her. Now she was tense and annoyed. It was his own fault they weren't properly together, he knew, and it was something he berated himself for daily. He had been in love with her since they were giddy teens. Indeed, she'd been his first love. His only love, looking back. She had adored him too. She'd always put her younger brother first, but other than Ronan, Ray had been the light of her life. But he had been young and hot-blooded, and hadn't wanted to settle down and play family, which was what Lily had wanted and needed. So he had kept things light and played the field. It shouldn't have come as a shock to him when she met someone else and settled down with him instead. He had watched from a distance as she'd set up home and had the twins and then Ruby. He'd hated Alfie, the kid's dad, with a jealous passion. Then one day Alfie up and left, having taken up with some skirt that took his fancy more than Lily. He left Lily and the kids to fend for themselves, no thought for anyone other than himself, and he was never seen again. Ray had swooped back in, ready to be her shoulder to cry on, but she hadn't cried. Not in front of him, anyway. She'd put her hard face on and just worked more furiously than ever to give the kids everything they needed. If anything, the experience had just made her stronger, and although their romantic relationship had eventually blossomed again, she'd never allowed him the chance to get too close. "Anyway," he said, changing the subject, "that actually wasn't why I came. I've been hearing rumblings about Harry Snow wanting to make waves with you and Ronan." "Oh?" Lily sat up, her irritation forgotten. "He's been talking about poking around your turf, trying to take over some market space. Not just with you, all round. But it would affect you more than most, I guess." He shrugged and took another sip of whiskey. "You might want to have a look into that. Approach him head on. He's a weaselly fucker. Likes to go round the houses, but don't like having to deal with things face to face." "Yeah, I know." Lily stared off into space, lost in thought. Ray downed the rest of his whiskey. Harry Snow was a savvy businessman and had next to no scruples, which served him well. He wasn't a particularly popular man, but he had some very large businesses which fed into many of the firms, and so people put up with his odd ways. In turn, he hated people. He hated having to deal with them, had developed a nervous tic whenever forced to engage in conversation with another person, as though it physically hurt him. Perhaps if Lily used that to her advantage, she could sway his interests away from her area without having to get heavy-handed. Ray wanted to offer to sort it all out for her, but he knew that she would just decline. He could count on one hand the times she'd come to him for help, and it had only been when her back had been so up against a wall that she'd had absolutely no other option. "Well," he said, standing up, "you know where I am if you need me."
I know where you are, she replied, her gaze turning sharply towards him. She stood up and shot him a challenging smile. I'm rather hoping for the next few hours at least, you'll be upstairs. She turned and left the room, her petite behind swaying from side to side provocatively. Ray watched her with an appreciative smile. It didn't matter how many years passed, she still knew how to get him exactly where she wanted him. Well, she called back over her shoulder, are you coming? Shrugging off his jacket, he followed her upstairs. He didn't need to be asked twice. Chapter 13. Scarlett checked her makeup in the rearview mirror one last time. She felt very smart today, smarter than she had ever felt before. But then she'd had no need to dress like this until now. At the weekend, she'd gone and bought her first ever suit, a smart grey trouser suit with a fitted jacket and a small black ruffle along the edge of the pockets. She wore this now, with a black polo neck and her favourite pair of black heels to match. Her pale skin was flawless already with youth, so she didn't usually wear much makeup. But today she'd applied some eyeliner and mascara to her grey-blue eyes and pillar-box red lipstick to finish the look. With her dark, wavy hair loose around her shoulders, she felt like £1,000,000. Stepping out of the car, she looked up at the imposing industrial building, and a smile brightened her face. She'd lost count of the number of times she'd been in here over the years, but this time she wasn't entering as a child just visiting her father. She was entering as a young woman ready to work alongside him, and the thought warmed her. She was close to her dad. Leaving him at the end of summer was going to be the hardest part of all. She swallowed a small lump that rose in her throat at the thought. Having heard her car pull up, Ronan came to the door to meet her. As he opened it for her, he paused and a fond smile crept up on his face. "What?" she asked, feeling self-conscious. "Nothing. It's just..." He smiled almost sadly. "You look so grown up." "Well, that's probably 'cause I am," she said with a small laugh. "You wouldn't want me helping on the accounts if I wasn't, would you?" "This is true," Ronan replied, following her inside. "Come on then, let's start in the office. You don't need a tour. You know where everything is." They made their way across the busy factory floor, past the machines and the people who worked them, some of whom tipped their hats to Scarlett as she passed. They all knew who she was. They reached the metal stairs and climbed up to the 2 offices above. From one of the windows, Scarlett could see Aunt Lily on the phone. She waved and Lily smiled back briefly before turning away with a frown as she talked urgently down the line. We'll see your aunt in a minute. She's just dealing with something." Scarlett glanced at Ronan and could tell from his face that Lily's call was probably not one for the legitimate side of their business. She pursed her lips and filed this away in her mind. Her mother had been adamant that if she was going to work in the factory over the summer, that she had to be kept strictly on the legitimate side of things. Scarlett wasn't sure how she felt about this demand. She had grown up in her father's world, much as Kath tried to ignore it, and she knew exactly who her family were. What was the point in pretending otherwise? It wasn't as though they'd put her on anything big. There was only so much of the underworld they could allow someone who wasn't all in to become involved with. "Here we are. I figure for now you can move between our offices, as we're rarely both in at the same time. Then we'll figure out what to do about a proper desk for you later on, if we need it. That all right with you?" Ronan asked, his tone hopeful as they stepped into his office. Scarlett looked down. Even now she could see the hope in his eyes, spurred on by her lack of confirmation. She felt bad then. She'd been trying to spare him the pain for a while longer by keeping her decision to herself, but perhaps it was just drawing out the agony. She resolved to find the time to break the news to him over the next few days. "That's fine. So, where do I start?" she asked, looking around. Ronan's office was the same as Lily's, square, purpose-built, practical. But they each had a few luxuries in there which warmed up the place. Ronan had an old-fashioned, oversized mahogany desk. He'd told them the story time and again about how he'd found it in an old antique store one winter and had fallen in love with it. Behind it stood a comfortable red leather chair. Several pictures of them all lined the wall to the side. In contrast, her aunt's desk was of a sleek modern design, and everything matched perfectly.
"Well, for now I could do with you jumping in on sorting out the paperwork. The hard copy files for our customers are a total shambles. I need everything organised into sections and then date order. It's boring, I know," Ronan said with a grimace, "but it needs doing, and to be honest, it's the best way to start learning about how we work here. You'll get to see who our regular customers are and the sort of levels they order in."
Scarlett nodded and glanced to the side of the office. "So, all of these files in here?" she asked, gesturing towards the wall of filing cabinets.
"The first 3 rows. Listen, you go ahead and use my desk."
Ronan glanced out of his window distractedly.
"I need to go talk to Lil about some things, then I'll make us a coffee."
He began walking out.
"And we'll go for lunch today, yeah? I'll take you somewhere special to celebrate your first day."
He grinned at her as he left, and the door slowly shut behind him. As the room became quiet, the only noise creeping through from outside, the rhythmic hum of the machinery, Scarlett placed her hands on her hips and looked around, feeling slightly disappointed. She'd hoped they would be working together during her time here, not apart. That was the main reason she'd suggested it, to gain more quality time with her dad. But still, she was here to make some extra money too, and he'd promised to take her to lunch, so it wasn't all bad. She nodded to herself and turned in a slow circle, assessing the room and mentally processing the task ahead of her. Snapping herself into work mode, she marched forward and opened the first filing cabinet. It might be boring, but if she was going to be stuck organising files, then she was going to do a damn good job of it. Chapter 14. Ronan quietly closed the door to Lily's office. He sat down in one of the chairs to the side and waited. "Right, leave this with me. I'll see what we can do." She ended the call and turned to Ronan with an irritated sigh. "That was Sonia. They've closed down the chippy, citing health hazards."
"Oh, shit."
Ronan closed his eyes with a groan. "Yeah, not what we need right now. That's that laundry stopped for at least a week, best case scenario. Plus, they're a protection client, so we need to try and get them back open." She twisted her mouth to one side.
"Dean?"
"Got promoted last month, and we haven't tapped up his replacement," Lily said, cutting him off. Dean was the local health inspector, who wasn't averse to taking cash bribes any time they needed somewhere to be avoided or reopened off the back of a bad review. Or at least he had been until his promotion.
"Who's the new guy? I could go over today, talk to him," Ronan suggested.
"No, don't worry. I already befriended him in a bar last week. I just haven't got round to finding out whether or not he's up for a bribe. We got interrupted." "I'll arrange a drink and get to the point tonight," she replied, walking around her desk and sitting in her chair. She crossed one slim leg over the other, lit a cigarette, and relaxed back in the chair, resting her wrists on the arms. So, she took a drag and blew out a thin line of smoke. What are you starting Scarlett on?
Sorting out the files?
The files? Lily pulled a face. Really? The girl dragged herself out of bed to do something you could get a minimum wage admin assistant to do.
She's only here for the summer at the moment, Lil. Plus, whether she stays on or not, I think it's important to start at the bottom and learn how things work that way. We certainly had to,
Ronan responded. We didn't have a choice, Lily replied, looking away through the wall to a distant memory. Or parents to help us out. And plus, if you're trying to entice her to stay rather than go off to this fancy university of hers, boring her to death isn't going to do you any favours.
I know, but there's no point dazzling her with a false front either, he replied. I don't want to trick her into staying, only for her to realise later that it ain't all fun and games.
He sighed.
I want her here just as much as you. I didn't spend my whole life slaving away, building this business up with blood, sweat and tears to not pass it on to my only child. But at the same time, I can't force her to stay. She has to want to stay. She has to want to be part of this.
We ain't going to be around forever, Ronan, Lily said quietly. And this place is going to need them all to survive.
I know, Ronan agreed. I know.
He was silent for a moment.
Look, she still hasn't decided what she's doing yet. I'm hoping that being here, even just on the files, will show her all there is in store, all that I've built up for her.
I really hope you're right, Ronan, Lily replied, taking another drag on her cigarette. For all our sakes. Outside the office, just beyond the slightly open door, Scarlett quietly retreated into her father's office. She shut the door again silently and put her hands to her face as the guilt piled down hard upon her shoulders. How on earth was she going to tell him now? Nipping down the stairs to the small kitchen, Ronan set the coffee pot on its stand and waited for it to come to a boil. Pulling his phone out of his pocket, he typed out a quick message confirming his afternoon meeting. He paused, his expression thoughtful as he wondered once more whether he should tell Lily what he was planning. But he dismissed the idea almost immediately. She wouldn't like the idea at all. It was a long shot. Chances were it would come to nothing, and she had enough on her plate to think about already. No, he'd see if it panned out first before he brought her into the loop. The light on the coffee machine flickered on, and Ronan grabbed 2 cups and began to pour. Suddenly he desperately hoped that his meeting paid off. If it did, fair terms could be agreed and a mutual understanding met. This could sort out their larger money laundering issues once and for all, which would mean Lily could relax and let go of the idea of pushing more money through the factory for good. Chapter 15. Scarlett watched her father across the table in the restaurant he'd taken her to for lunch. Her taut nerves jangled as she tried to work out how to tell him the plans she'd already put into motion. It was going to kill him. She knew this. It would be better for all concerned if she just got it out now, if she was just honest and open and ripped the Band-Aid off quickly. But right now there didn't seem to be an obvious way into the conversation. Her father was unusually distracted. She picked up her sparkling water and took a sip, then glanced down at the menu. "So, what's up?" she asked. He looked up at her in question. "You've barely said 2 words since we left the office. You okay?" She watched him, concerned. He was never quiet. Even when he was juggling a million things, he was still jovial and on the ball, always talking, always joking in his deep, booming voice.
I'm fine,
he answered, plastering on a wide grin.
Just thinking about a meeting I've got this afternoon.
Oh? Scarlett raised her eyebrow in interest. What meeting? Perhaps she could tag along. After a morning wading through the mess of files they'd left unorganised for so many years, she could do with something a little different for a while.
Nothing interesting. Just a client I want to talk to about something.
Ronan dismissed it with a wave of his hand. Scarlett leaned in, interested. Well, why don't I come with you? You know, take notes maybe. Keep you company? The meeting might provide her with the opportunity she needed if she couldn't find a way to tell him over lunch.
No.
Ronan's reply came a little too fast and strong, and Scarlett frowned.
I mean,
he softened his tone.
It's nothing that would interest you, and nor would it make any sense.
I'm not stupid, Scarlett retorted. I pick things up pretty quickly.
Well, it's not.
He floundered for a moment.
It's just not suitable for you to come to this one, okay?
Scarlett bit her bottom lip as it clicked that the meeting was for the other side of the business. Ah, I see. She smiled and busied herself with her napkin. Ronan locked his jaw, clearly debating whether or not to say what was on his mind. For a few moments it seemed as though he'd decided against it, but then he began to speak.
You know, when Lily and I started out, we knew nothing about this life. Not really, he said. And it wasn't easy, none of it. But especially in the early days. If it wasn't for Lil, we wouldn't have made it this far at all, that's for sure. She's got bigger balls made of harder steel than any man I know, he admitted with a crooked smile. And I see so much of her determination and strength in you. She does too, I can tell. There's a fire running through the veins of the women in this family, more so than us men, if I'm honest.
He glanced at her.
But more than that, you're smart, Scarlett. Really smart, he said with feeling. And if you joined us, you'd be an asset, of course you would. In fact, if you joined us, I have no doubt you'd end up more a force to be reckoned with than even me one day. I'd be proud to have you by my side.
He smiled at her. Scarlett nodded, her heart sinking as he finally made his subtle plea. I know. She looked down at the menu. Ronan exhaled slowly.
But, of course, he said, the most important thing to me is your happiness.
He swallowed and shifted in his seat.
Whatever you decide to do, I'll be proud of you, my little Scar.
He studied her for a moment.
I always have been, and I always will be. Remember that.
Scarlett swallowed the lump of emotion that had gathered in her throat. Thanks, Dad, she said. She looked up with a quick smile. Let's eat, shall we? I'm bloody starving.
Course. Come on then. What are you having?
Scarlett forced herself to choose some food and settled in to listen as Ronan began to tell her a funny story about a client he'd taken here. He was getting to the climax of it when something snapped inside her and a wave of determination set in. Dad, she said suddenly, unable to keep her secret any longer. Hmm? He looked at her questioningly. She took a deep breath and licked her lips. They felt dry. Can I take your order? She blinked up at the waiter who had intruded at the exact moment she'd finally worked up the courage.
Yeah, I'll have the...
Ronan began to order, and her courage slipped away. She just couldn't hurt him, she realised resignedly. Not today, at least. She'd just have to find a way to do it tomorrow. Chapter 16. Scarlett awoke to the sound of a bell ringing somewhere and rubbed her eyes with a frown. Surely it wasn't morning already, she thought. The fuzzy tug of sleep threatening to overtake her. It hadn't sounded like her alarm, but what else could it have been? The bell rang again, and this time she rolled over to check the time on the small blue screen of her digital bedside clock. It was just past 2 in the morning. Who on earth was ringing their doorbell at this hour? She heard her parents' bedroom door opening and the soft pattering of her mother's footsteps descending the stairs. She sat up and rubbed her eyes once more, slipping her feet into her slippers and reaching out for her dressing gown. Whoever it was, they were going to get the bollocking of their lives once her dad got down there. Unless it was a matter of life and death, no one was welcome to put in an urgent call at his home in the middle of the night. Then again, she considered, as she entered the hallway, perhaps it was a matter of life or death. You never knew in their line of work. Kath opened the door, and Scarlett listened to the voices as the sound carried up the stairs. She leaned on the wall just out of sight, not having decided yet whether or not she was interested in joining the situation.
"Hello? Oh, officer. What is it?" Kath said, worry flooding her tone immediately. "What do you want?"
Scarlett froze and her eyes widened. Why were they here? Were they going to arrest her dad? But he wasn't here, she remembered suddenly. He hadn't been in when they'd both hit the sack hours before, and she hadn't heard him come in since. This wasn't unusual. He was often out through the night, dealing with what her mother referred to as his other work. So, whatever they wanted to arrest him for, they would be out of luck tonight. She nearly turned to get her phone to warn him, but paused, deciding to wait and hear what they had to say first. The more information she could give him, the better.
"Madam, may we come in?" a male voice asked.
"That depends," Kath replied in a clipped tone. "Do you have a warrant?"
Scarlett's mouth curled up into a grin. Her mother may hate what her father did for a living, but she loved him fiercely and would protect him with every ounce of strength she had.
"We don't need a warrant tonight, madam," the officer replied tiredly. "We just need to talk to you for a moment. It's about your husband."
"Well, yes, I gathered that," Kath replied sarcastically. "But unless you have a warrant or arrest me and take me in, I have nothing to say to you."
"I don't think you understand what we're here for. We're not here to accuse your husband of anything."
"Well, damn right," she interrupted indignantly, "'cause he ain't done nothing."
"We're here because we have some news for you about your husband."
There was a silence, and Scarlett crept forward, a frown forming on her forehead.
"What do you mean?"
Kath asked, doubt creeping into her tone.
"Look, please can we come in, Mrs. Drew? We're not here to cause problems. We just have some news, but I think you might need to sit down,"
another voice said gently, this one female. Scarlett felt a coldness creep through her body, and she pulled her dressing gown tighter around her slim body. What news were they talking about? Had he been arrested? After another short silence, Kath responded, her tone less abrasive than before.
"Well, okay then, but just into the kitchen, mind. It's through there."
Scarlett heard 2 sets of footsteps move into the house and down the hallway before the front door closed, and her mother hurried after them. Worried now, she moved to the stairs and crept down the first few treads, then sat and strained her ears to listen.
"Can I just ask, Mrs. Drew, When was the last time you saw your husband?
It was this morning, before he went off to work, she replied. At the factory, she continued pointedly. His place of work. You can confirm that's where he went with our daughter who works there with him, or my sister-in-law who's his business partner.
And that would be a Ms. Lily Drew, is that correct?
Yes, it is. Listen here, why are you asking me all these questions? I ain't answering any more until I've spoken to my husband. I thought you had some news for me. What's going on?
Kath began to sound agitated.
Did anyone get hold of Lily Drew yet? The male officer asked quietly.
Let me check with dispatch. Hang on. The female officer's voice tailed off until Scarlett couldn't hear what was being said.
You're trying to trip me up here, ain't ya? Kath asked. I've had enough of this. Get to the point now, mate, or otherwise get out. I don't appreciate being woken up in the middle of the night for a trip around the houses, I'll tell you that much.
They've spoken to Lily Drew already, the female officer piped up. Apparently she's on her way over here now.
Lil? Kath asked, confused. Why is Lil coming over? What's going on?
I'm so sorry, Mrs. Drew, the male officer said gently. But we have some bad news. A body was found earlier this evening, and we've confirmed through the ID in his wallet that it's your husband.
Scarlett gasped and she put her hand up to cover her mouth. The cold worry that had flooded her body before now turned her to ice. She shook her head. Surely that wasn't right. They must have made a mistake. Her dad was fit and healthy for his age, and he was always careful. They had to be wrong. It had to be a case of mistaken identity, she reasoned, as her thoughts all began to race and melt into each other. The silence stretched on in the kitchen, and Scarlett nearly stood to go down, but then her mother finally spoke.
No,
she said, her voice strong with certainty.
You've got it wrong.
That's right, Scarlett whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes as the officer's words resounded in her head.
You tell him, Mum.
Her mum would know the truth. She was sure of it.
It can't be my husband, Kath continued. It just can't be.
I'm so sorry, Mrs. Drew. I know you don't want to believe it, but it's true, the female officer said gently. We ran every check to be sure before we came over.
No, you're lying.
A wobble appeared in her tone now, and at the sound of her resolve breaking, Scarlett's heart dropped.
It can't be.
A sob cracked through her last word. We're so sorry, the male officer repeated.
Not my Ronan. No,
she wailed.
No, 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 no.
Scarlett tried to stand up, but for some reason she couldn't. Panic began to overwhelm her, and her breathing started to spike. Her dad wasn't dead, was he? They'd only gone for lunch a few hours ago. He'd been right there opposite her. Her chest began to heave as huge silent sobs took over. She bent down and put her head between her legs, fighting for breath as the whole situation overwhelmed her.
He can't be dead,
Kath cried, her heart breaking for all to hear.
He can't leave us. We need him. We need him here at home.
All strength was gone from her words now, replaced only with sorrow and fear.
He can't leave us. We love him. We love him,
she repeated. Her voice trailed off into a heart-wrenching sob.
The sound of her crying filled the air for a few moments, and Scarlett's tears fell between her knees to the floor unchecked as she tried to gain a grip on her breathing. The world seemed to be spinning and she couldn't slow it down, because every time she held on to a clear thought, it told her that her dad was gone forever, and that didn't make sense. No matter how she tried, she couldn't seem to get her head around this piece of information. It was all too surreal. It was like some sort of nightmare. Perhaps it was a nightmare. It had to be, surely. "How can he be gone?" she heard Kath ask through her tears. When no one answered, Kath began to shout in anger. "I said, how can he be gone?" Her sobs grew louder as she grabbed onto this anger like a lifeboat. "I just don't understand. What happened?" she screamed at the officers. "We're still investigating what exactly happened, but it appears that someone cut through his esophagus with a blade of some sort." "They slit his throat! They slit my Ronan's throat! That's what you're saying to me!" Kath screeched, her sobs becoming hysterical. "Please, Mrs. Drew, I know this is a very big shock, but please try to stay calm." "Stay calm! Stay calm!" she cried. "I've just heard that someone slit my husband's throat, the man I love, have loved forever." She began to wail, once more overtaken by the grief. Scarlett heard the front door open and looked up. Lily walked in, her face whiter than Scarlett had ever seen it before, and with a look of shock and pain etched into it. She paused in the hallway as she caught sight of her niece on the stairs to her right, and her sister-in-law ahead of her in the kitchen, debating who to go to first. Kath, roused by seeing Lily, began to shout in anger again, this time aiming her vitriol towards her. "This is your fault," she hurled. "You did this to him. You did this to him. You killed him. You fucking killed him, Lily," she screamed, her voice getting louder and more hysterical with every word. Scarlett heard a scuffling sound. "Get out of my way! Let me through, for God's sake! This is on you, Lily Drew! His blood is on your hands! Get off me, I said! You killed him, Lil! This is on you! This is all on you!"
Chapter 17. Lily pulled an extra blanket out of her airing cupboard and walked down the hallway to her daughter Ruby's old room, where she had left Scarlett. As she entered, Scarlett tried to rub the falling tears off her cheeks. She was sitting on the bed, her knees pulled up to her chest and her arms wrapped around them. Lily looked down on her with a wave of pity. She looked so vulnerable in that moment, just a little girl who'd lost her father, no sign of the strong young woman underneath. She placed the blanket on the bed and sank down in the chair next to it, reaching across and laying her hand on Scarlett's arm. She'd had to take the girl out of that house, away from the scene Kath had made. In her pain and panic, Kath had completely lost it. She'd screamed and fought the police officers, trying to get to Lily. She'd poured all her terror into anger and aimed that all at her sister-in-law, getting more and more incensed the more they held her back. Lily had wanted to tell them to let her go so that she could try and calm Kath down, but stuck in her own shock, she couldn't work out how and had just stood there, mute and numb. In the end, the officers had called for medical assistance, and Kath had been sedated and taken off to a local mental health institution for observation and assessment.
Kath had spent time there many years before, while recovering from a breakdown following the loss of 2 babies close together. It had been early on in their marriage. All she'd ever wanted was to have a family with Ronan. And so when the doctors had told her that her chances of carrying full term were slim, she hadn't been able to cope. Scarlett had been their miracle baby a few years later, and she'd never shown signs of declining mental health since. But with all this on her record, the officers had decided to take no chances on leaving her alone in the state she'd worked herself up to. In any other circumstance, Lily would have fought to keep her out of a place like that. But right now she couldn't help but think it was the best place for her, just until they could get a grip on things and work out what was going on. They were all in shock, all devastated by the news. If she was being honest, it still hadn't truly sunk in. She half expected someone to knock at the door and tell them they'd made a mistake. But that hadn't happened yet, and she was beginning to realise it never would. Once the ambulance had driven away with Kath, Lily had guided Scarlett out to her car without a word and driven them both to her house. Now here they were together, confused, in pain, and in shock. Lily noticed Scarlett was shaking and opened up the blanket, laying it around the girl's shoulders. "I'm not cold," Scarlett said in barely more than a whisper. "I'm warm. I just can't seem to stop the shaking." "That's the shock setting in then," Lily replied quietly. "I'll get you a whiskey. It will take the edge off." "No," Scarlett said quickly, her hand shooting out to grasp Lily's arm as she began to rise. "Please don't leave me," she begged, her tone trembling with uncertainty. Lily lowered herself back down in the chair and grasped her niece's hand. "Of course," she said softly. "I won't go anywhere. I'm here, little doll." Tears filled her eyes, and she blinked them away. "Little doll?" A brief nostalgic smile flitted across Scarlett's haunted face. "You haven't called me that in years." Lily nodded and swallowed the lump in her throat. "I haven't needed to," she replied. It was something they'd called her as a child, and, as she'd grown, whenever she'd sought comfort. Scarlett laid her head back against the wall and stared off into the distance, tears still running unchecked down her face. Lily watched her in the soft glow from the lamp that was lighting the room. Somehow the pain had aged her young face by years. "You called me Little Doll, and what was it you called Ruby?" Her forehead puckered into a small frown as she tried to remember. "Little Angel, was it?" "That's right," Lily replied, her broken heart sinking even lower at the mention of her daughter. She pulled a sad smirk at the irony of the name. These days Ruby was as far from an angel as she could possibly get. When she was born, with her curly red hair and her pale skin, she looked like this angel we used to put at the top of the Christmas tree. Don't know what happened to it over the years. I think it got lost. But yeah, we started calling her Little Angel. Then when you were born, with your big grey-blue eyes and little puckered mouth, you looked like a porcelain doll. So that's how that all came about. She closed her eyes as grief began to set in. Your dad, he was the one who coined those. Scarlett sniffed again, her tears falling faster. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment. I just don't understand, she said through a sob. Was it a robbery? She looked at her aunt, her eyes pleading for answers that Lily didn't have. Were they mugging him? Why was he even out there? Ronan had been found in a small village outside London that none of them had heard of before today. Was that where his meeting was? Who was he there with?
I don't know, Lily admitted.
What, where the meeting was or who he was with?
Scarlett asked.
Any of it, she replied unhappily.
Ronan didn't tell me what he was doing today. Yesterday, I guess now, she added, looking at the clock. It was 4 a.m.
He just said he had a meeting. I figured he'd just update me later.
She tailed off and shook her head.
We don't always keep up with each other's schedules. We just tell each other what we need to know. Where would he keep the details? A diary?
Scarlett pressed, trying to cling to anything that could give them an answer.
Lily shook her head once more.
Ronan doesn't keep anything written down that's not strictly factory business. Neither of us does. It's the easiest way to get caught out. There will be no trail related to this meeting.
There has to be something,
Scarlett cried, the pain shining through her eyes. Lily stood up and joined Scarlett on the bed, seeing how close her niece was to completely falling apart. She scooted up next to her and pulled her into her arm. I promise you, I will do everything I can to find out what's happened. I won't rest until we know.
But with how careful your dad was, it's going to take time, she said.
They sat in silence for a while, the only sound Scarlett's sobs as she cried into her aunt's shoulder. Lily stroked her hair, blinking away the tears that threatened to fall from her own shock and grief. She still couldn't believe they were having this conversation at all. The idea that Ronan was no longer on this earth, that he wasn't going to walk back into the factory tomorrow, still didn't feel real. But somehow it was, and the whole world as they knew it was crashing down. Scarlett's sobs finally subsided, and she grew calm. Lily continued to stroke her until she sat up and leaned back against the wall beside her once more.
It's down to us now, Scarlett, she said quietly. This family has been broken. A huge chunk of it has been ripped away from us. She swallowed. So, it's up to us to keep it together, you and me.
She squeezed Scarlett's hand and turned to look at her. We need to keep everything together. For him. Fresh tears fell from Scarlett's eyes, and she shut them in grief.
Yes,
she breathed.
We do.
Lily exhaled and rubbed her forehead. You'll stay here for as long as you need, she said resolutely. Your mum just needs a rest and a little help processing things. Then she'll be back home. But until then, you can stay with me. If you want to, that is, she added, remembering that Scarlett was a grown woman, even if she was vulnerable right now.
Thanks. I'll stay until she comes home. Then I'd better go back. She'll need me.
She sniffed and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Lily nodded. Scarlett was right. Kath would need her. Kath had lived her whole life centred around Ronan. Now she would be completely lost, and Lily wasn't sure how she was going to cope.
What about Ruby?
Scarlett suddenly asked. What about her? Lily replied.
What if she comes back to visit?
Lily looked around the room sadly. This had been Ruby's room for so many years. She had kept it exactly how she'd left it when she was 16, hoping against hope that she would come back for good one day. From her teenage years, Ruby had been rebellious, running away whenever the mood or some boy took her. Lily had spent years pulling her hair out with worry, scouring the streets at nights for her. Sometimes she found her and would take her home.
Mostly Ruby would turn up days later with a bad hangover and a foul attitude. Lily had lost count of the nights she'd sobbed and fretted, praying to God to deliver her precious daughter home safely. As Ruby had grown, so had her bad taste. Naughty boys made way for dangerous men, and alcohol escalated to drugs. Lily had continued fighting to get back the lovely girl she'd known and loved. She'd cleaned her up and taken her to rehab countless times, only for Ruby to run away at the first opportunity. When Ruby refused to move home for good, she'd set her up in a new flat for a fresh start, helped her find a job, given her money and clothes and everything she needed to find her feet again. She set her up this way time and time again, but every time Ruby ended up turning on her. Every job she found her, Ruby would walk out, or stop turning up, or even steal from them. Lily had had to pay out to smooth things over with Ruby's angry victims numerous times. One day, Ruby had started stealing from Lily too. At first she'd ignored it, pushing more and more funds Ruby's way in the hope it would be enough to stop her treating her own family like this. But it was never enough, and the more Lily gave her, the worse Ruby became. Every penny went on booze and drugs, or into the pocket of some lowlife who was sleeping with her at the time. Every offer of help to get clean was met with aggression and strife. Eventually, Lily had come to the painful realization that by giving Ruby money, all she was doing was enabling her to access more of the bad things she craved. It had almost killed her to do it, but she'd stood up to her daughter and told her that, whilst she'd help her out now and then, and whilst she was always welcome to come home, she wouldn't be funding her life anymore. Ruby had kicked and screamed and threatened all sorts, but Lily had stood firm despite the fact it had broken her heart. Ruby had barely been seen since. She turned up once in a while when she had nothing better to do and was hungry. She'd stay for dinner, perhaps stay a day or two, insult them all, and then leave again, usually with some cash in her pocket to see her through a few days. She still held on to the hope that one day Ruby would wake up and want to change. Quietly she dreamed of it all coming together, of being able to save her only daughter from herself. She knew realistically the chances of it happening at this point were slim, but she just couldn't bear to think of the alternative. "I doubt we'll be seeing her in the next couple of days," she replied. She saw the quickly veiled look of relief on Scarlett's face and felt sad. Ruby and Scarlett should have been close. They were cousins, Drews, 2 shades of the same colour. But instead they despised one another. She could understand Scarlett's feelings to an extent. Ruby was a live wire, caused trouble and destruction wherever she could. It was natural for Scarlett to be wary of her. She just wished it didn't have to be this way.